Gallery.
Hey, Chris. Hey, Jess. Hey, Annie.
Hey.
Hello. Welcome. Waiting for a couple more people. Hey, Pam. Hey, Linda. Great. Welcome back. I'm going to go ahead and get started. And a couple more folks may trickle in. Welcome to day 2, end of life planning and preparation and literacy and contemplation. I have my candle lit again today, and maybe you all do have an altar continuing this brave and creative journey. Welcome, Phyllis, Teresa, hey. I think we're all here, or almost all here. All right, just keep yourselves muted. It's easier on the sound quality. So I'm just going to start today. I'm going to read a little thing. I'm also going to show you this beautiful photo that I just found on social media today. The life cycle. Every single phase of the life cycle is sacred. I love this image. And this quote today is from Richard Rudd, who has created the spiritual project called the Gene Keys, which I'm in love with. And he says, when a human mind imagines the concept of immortality, it does so from within its own limitations. The mind can only conceptualize something within time. So it sees immortality as time that simply stretches into the future forever. Yet true immortality is the cessation of time altogether. This is the only way to escape death. To live so entirely in the present moment that death does not exist. Welcome, welcome. Folks are trickling in. Hey, Lori. Hey, Audrey. Hey, Annie. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So your homework from last week was to contemplate everything we had talked about to talk to family and friends, to contemplate which one and which two, to engage with potential healthcare agents, to read and research and listen and gather info, any of those things that you felt drawn to get with your buddy, to work on your checklist. So I'm going to stop sharing for the moment, and would love to hear what y'all, if a few of you want to check in, how your week went, what you've been thinking about, what's alive for you, what did you get together with your buddy, those kinds of things. So who would like to share today? Teresa, then Christine and Susan. Those are the hands I saw. Teresa, go ahead.
It was a good week. I really didn't realize or think how this was all going to come together, but it came together very smoothly. I met with possible health care advocate, my daughter. I talked to my spouse about this. Everybody's on board. I still have some work to do. And I did double duty with my mom, sent her some information. And I'm going to go visit her, planning a trip to Texas. And so getting that conversation started. So, and then Susan was great. We FaceTimed and yeah, it all came together for me. Yes, thanks.
That's wonderful. How old is your mom, Teresa?
She's 96 and her brother is 99, and they both live in their houses by themselves.
Wow, what a celebration.
I know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good conversation to be having with them. And they're both lucid and great. Wow, fabulous. Good, thank you for sharing that. Christine.
Well, I had two wonderful things happen around this extraordinary course. And one is that my dear childhood friend, Jonathan Riley, he's 6'2", down to 100 pounds. And he still will not quite go there. You know, he's in hospice, but he won't talk about dying per se, but he did ask to talk to Greg Lathrop, you know, Karen's husband, the death doula. And he also asked me, and I don't know if this is legal or ethical, I told him about the course and how wonderful it was. And no matter what age, no matter what stage. And he said, gee, I'd like that checklist. And so I don't know if that's okay, but he's probably on his way to the other side. And so I just was so grateful that he was so positive in his response. And he did say that I'm not afraid of dying. And I was so grateful to hear that. And I believe him. I do believe him. But yeah, it's that this is the process. This is the reason I took this course, because of Johnny. But now I know it's far greater than that, the reason. So, and then the second thing. So thank you for that. It's like the door opened for us. It was between him and me. So and then the other is that Cynthia and I met. She came all the way to my house in Fairview, which is, I say all the way because it's a steep driveway. And we had the most wonderful time, you know, just talking and about dying, about death, about our lives. It was just, it's almost like, of course, we know we're not orchestrating this show, but at least I know that. And it was so uncanny how fitting that comment was and is. So anyway, it was, and we talked about healthcare. We talked about several of the aspects of the checklist, which she's much more well versed in than I am. So it was just, so I'm on my way. You know, I'm in kindergarten, but I'm on my way. So thank you.
Beautiful, Christine. Thank you. I heard that you got inspired to take this course because of your friend Johnny in hospice, and that he's open to, whatever. And yes, you can share any of these resources with him. Absolutely.
Oh, thank you.
And, he's on an internal journey right now. as much as you can get the external stuff out of the way so that he can, go in, because really it's him and his soul right now walking towards that door. So yeah, as much as you can support that. And then, yeah, I'm so glad. It's inspiring to hear that you and Cynthia got together in person. I'm so grateful that that's a possibility again these days. And bravo. Yay. And yes, I think the conversation about death opens the door to the ecstatic, which is why I like talking about it so much, because it feels so good to talk about it. And it's counterintuitive, but it's delightful. That's really delightful. So I'm thrilled for y'all. Thank you. Thank you. Susan.
Well, first of all, I just wanted to, I applaud Teresa again, because when we spoke this past Wednesday, and when we met in the first part, I know I could sense that she had some hesitation and she was a little bit nervous about what was upcoming. So I was cheerleading her. I was so happy for her when we were talking that she was able to make so much progress in such a short period of time. So I will be thinking of you as you continue on, not only for her mother, but for herself. I was just so excited when we were talking. So for myself, I was able to take the checklist. I already have some of this stuff in the works. So your addendum was wonderfully. Thank you so much. I was actually quite surprised how similar what we wanted was. So I took your addendum and updated it because I like the format of that one for myself. And I also looked into the last piece that I'm trying to figure out for myself is my body disposal. And I know, originally I've been saying I want to be cremated, but I'm kind of shifting around on some different ideas with that. So I did request some information off of one of your resources for the aqua, the water cremation. And hopefully that funeral home will get back to me. I didn't realize that we had something like that here in the area. And that there's something down in Asheville. So I want to learn more about that for myself. I also, my husband, I told him about the 5 wishes, and I actually ordered a starter kit, which comes with, I'm grabbing it real quick, came with 5 booklets, and I haven't looked at it yet. It just came today. And it comes with a guide, conversation guide for individuals and families. And I got 5 of them because I really want to try to broach this conversation with I have older siblings than myself here that I know haven't started anything. And I'm concerned about that. My sister she has children, but no spouse or anything like that. So I have a bachelor brother. And so I really want to very tactfully try to approach them with starting to think about this as well. I have no clue on what any of them want. And I feel like I want to and need to with them so I can help them when that time comes.
Excellent, 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 excellent. Yeah. So starting your conversations, working with the addendum, and yes, thank you for the good reminder. The 5 Wishes website, the booklets are great. And if you, I didn't know about the starter kit, but if you buy 1 booklet, it's like $5. But if you buy 25 booklets, they're like $1 each. So it's worth spending the $25. And then you get 25 of them, and then you could give that out like candy. Like, hey, how about one of these? At your death and dessert party, you could have like a stack there, and people need it. So good. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Couple more shares. Anyone else want to share what their week was like with their buddy or what they learned? Jess, yes, please.
So Chris and I are paired up, and we checked in over email, and we're like the perfect pairing because both of us are just in the phase of like thinking and contemplation and appreciating the lists and all of the information, but both just in a contemplative place. So it was nice to be able to like check in and say like, and I'm just thinking right now. And I started a conversation with my spouse, about this class. And as I suspected it would be, it was a difficult conversation for him and very emotional, just to say like, oh, we need to have this conversation and make these plans. And so that was good for me to know that it does need to be a slow process on my end to accommodate his like emotional capacity with these conversations. So it felt good though. Like everything's moving and thinking, and I have a very vivid imagination. And so like the process of imagining is very helpful for me right now to then go and make some, go and like fill in the details and do all the paperwork. So my imagination just needs a little time to wrap itself around some of this stuff.
Beautiful. Yeah, I hear that you're really well matched with your partner, which is awesome when that happens. And that, you know, you're realizing the sensitivity that you need to bring to your marriage and to the conversation. And I'm guessing that, you know, once our loved ones are able to move through potentially fear or grief or sorrow, that it can move into the empowering phase, which is where it ultimately leads. So thank you for your tenderness and sensitivity around that, and knowing the people in our lives and how to navigate that. That's really beautiful. Thank you. Chris, yes.
Yeah. Let me put my hand down here. Yeah, to add to that, yeah, we were a good match. I talked with another friend on the phone later about the workshop, and it brought up some other questions for me, which maybe we'll address more today. But she has a family history of Alzheimer's, and she said she was observing that many times people are perfectly physically functional, or, you know, well enough. They don't have anything really serious physically, but you know, cognitively, they may have no idea what's going on. And like, she personally doesn't want to live in that way. But, you know, what do you do in advance? And I mean, she also said, you know, Switzerland is the only place you can go to have end of life. I mean, to accelerate the end of your life legally, if you don't have some diagnosis that you're going to die within 6 months. So anyway, just, you know, she wants to do something before, if she does get Alzheimer's, she wants to do something as much as she can before that happens, because once it happens, you won't be able to.
Yeah.
Anyway, maybe that's part of what we'll talk about. But
yeah. And I've also noticed you've been mostly available last week for this class. Is that working out time-wise for you?
it is working out. One thing I thought was going to interfere was canceled, or was at a different time. And then it's just basically waiting on my dad to need me. And so far it's been convenient timing when he's needed me.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Really
Yeah.
good. I'm so glad you've been able to, it's been lovely having you.
Yeah.
Great. I want to speak to what you just said, because we won't get into it too deeply, but there are some states in the United States that are right to die states. There's a handful of them, and you have to be a resident of that state for something like 6 months in order to qualify. But to be of sound mind is part of that, no matter where you go. And I'm pretty sure that's also true in the Switzerland sort of Dignitas, which is also, there's a link on my site. So really any kind of institutional support is going to require sound mind. And they probably also require a terminal diagnosis. So I don't know that there's any way around that. And if one wants a way around that, like, hey, I want to opt out before the terminal diagnosis or before the dementia kicks in, that's going to be a do-it-yourself kind of situation for the most part, as far as I know. And now there are do-it-yourself situations. There's some links on my website, but nobody can be a proponent of that, right? That is just an educational only kind of system, right? Anybody that assists, anybody that, encourages, that's big time, no stuff legally. But there are resources out there. And so you can look at the very bottom of my page. I have some links. And should we get more death literate as a culture, there'll be more access to this stuff. I'm personally of the opinion that it's a sovereignty issue, that, we come in with this being and this body and this incarnation, and it's up to us what we do with that. But that's not a majority opinion. So, we just have to navigate those things in the legal world and protect the people who care about us, if, to not have them assist. So that's sort of outside of the scope of this workshop, but really juicy discussion and, some resources out there. And the voluntary stopping of eating and drinking is one of those interesting movements, which, as a healthy person, you're not going to die very quickly with the voluntary stopping of eating and drinking. So if it's a dementia issue, it's got to be something different. So yeah, check out the resources, have your friend check out those resources. Really good questions. I want to move on. I saw your hand, Linda. Can you do a quick share, and then we'll have more opportunities to share as well.
Okay, just really quick. I really appreciate us telling us to get going on it. So talking to my kids, we had a date, they were all on it. And then 20 minutes before, my son canceled. And it didn't surprise me at all. In fact, I had thought when it was only 20 minutes before, hey, he's not going to cancel, but he did. But a back and forth, he did get on the call, and I did hear him say, it's not that I'm just not wanting to have the conversation. Okay. But I know that had a part of it, but but it's good to just know that we're doing it. So now the next one is my daughter finding a good time for her, because she's 6 hours ahead. And I talked to she's my, I guess, my patient advocate. I don't even know. Joanne's like everything, like a friend of mine, and executor of my will. And I invite her over for dinner next Friday. We found a time and to talk about it. She couldn't take the class because it interfered with work. So I just really am glad. And we tried, my partner and I, to connect. It didn't happen, but that's okay. We will try again, so
Right. Thank you. Yeah, have her take the class in September. It's on a Saturday. Maybe that'll work better for her. And yeah, I think continue to use the excuse that you have a class, you have a partner, you have an accountability system. You need to have these conversations. So kind of when you put the blame and the responsibility outside of you, like that might motivate you more to keep us all to keep following up on these conversations. Well, I'm glad your kids are engaged at the very least. So thank you.
And another friend of mine lives in England, and my plan is to move to Italy. And I said, she'd be a great, and you guys know her, but we need people. I loved how you shared of people's strengths too, because otherwise it can be a hardship. But
yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Marianne needs a team to join. So think about that. Marianne got paired with someone who ended up opting out for this session and is going to take the session in September. So Marianne is partnerless. So if your team is willing to take Marianne on, and then there would be 3 of you in accountability circle, think about that. And then when we go to do a breakout, let me know if that's going to work for y'all. I think Linda asked me to put this photo back up, which is just a beautiful honoring of the life cycle, the life cycle. Okay, so our agenda for today, we're going to do 3, 4, and 5 wishes. We're going to do finish up the 5 wishes, and then we have a bunch of other paperwork to talk about. And then we're going to start on the after death care, which could be a whole 4 hours in and of itself. We're going to touch on the financial options and building a death positive community. There's just not enough time today to do everything we want to do, so we're going to do our best. We're also going to have a beautiful guest. So excited to share Meredith Spring with you, who's a funeral director. And I'm sure we could listen to her the entire time too, but we'll try to squeeze it all in. So we're going to do brisk pace through the last 3 wishes, and again, take a little bit of a longer break today instead of multiple breaks. But again, take care of yourselves, turn your screen off, roll around on the floor, stretch, eat, do whatever you need to do. And want you to fully take care of yourself, and we'll roll with the break as we do. Okay, so I am assuming that y'all have paperwork in front of you. Is someone who didn't read last time, who's willing to read, willing to start with, at least on my page, it's page 8, the top section, and wish 3. Anybody willing to read that? Linda, go ahead. Oh, you had your hand up. Maybe it was from last time. Annie, are you ready? Great. Go for it. You're muted. There you go.
Okay. Hi, everybody. The next 3 wishes deal with my personal, spiritual, and emotional wishes. They are important to me. I want to be treated with dignity near the end of my life, so I would like people to do the things written in wishes 3, 4, and 5 when they can be done. I understand that my family, my doctors, and other healthcare providers, my friends, and others may not be able to do these things or are not required by law to do these things. I do not expect the following wishes to place new or added legal duties on my doctors or other healthcare providers. I also do not expect these wishes to excuse my doctor or other healthcare providers from giving me the proper care asked for by law. I just realized I have to change to my reading glasses, not my computer glasses. Wish 3, my wish for how comfortable I want to be. Please cross out anything that you don't agree with. I do not want to be in pain. I want my doctor to give me enough medicine to relieve my pain, even if that means I will be drowsy or sleep more than I would otherwise. If I show signs of depression, nausea, shortness of breath, or hallucinations, I want my caregivers to do whatever they can to help me. I wish to have a cool, moist cloth put on my head if I have a fever. I want my lips and mouth kept moist to stop dryness. I wish to have warm baths often. I wish to be kept fresh and clean at all times. I wish to be massaged with warm oils as often as I can be. I wish to have my favorite music played when possible until my time of death. I wish to have personal care like shaving, nail clipping, hair brushing, and teeth brushing as long as they do not cause me pain or discomfort. I wish to have religious readings and well-loved poems read aloud when I am near death. I wish to know about options for hospice care to provide medical, emotional, and spiritual care for me and my loved ones.
Excellent. Who's up for reading wish 4?
I can read.
Great, thank you.
Wish 4, my wish for how I want people to treat me. Please cross out anything you don't agree with. I wish to have people with me when possible. I want someone to be with me when it seems that death may come at any time. I wish to have my hand held and be talked to when possible, even if I don't seem to respond to the voice or touch of others. I wish to have others by my side praying for me when possible. I wish to have the members of my faith community told that I am sick and asked to pray for me and visit me. I wish to be cared for with kindness and cheerfulness and not sadness. I wish to have pictures of my loved ones in my room near my bed. If I am not able to control my bowel or bladder functions, I wish for my clothes and bed linens to be kept clean and for them to be changed as soon as they can be if they have been soiled. I want to die in my home if that can be done.
Thank you. All right. Any thoughts about wishes 3 and 4?
I have one thought that I'm just remembering my mom's passing and how she had said she wanted people with her and she wanted people to be talking to her, and we were, and then the closer she came, and now I'm talking about hours, just hours before her death, she changed her mind and she really just wanted to be, she didn't want us to leave necessarily, but she didn't want us to talk. She wanted it to be quiet and she kind of wanted to be alone.
That's pretty tuned in of Mama. Yeah, beautiful.
She was tuned in. I wish if there would be an opportunity for me to tell her story here, because she's buried at the Carolina Memorial Sanctuary and her entire story is just phenomenal, but it's a long story and I have to plug in my computer or I'm going to leave you.
Yeah, so just a reminder that this is a template, right? They're working with 30 million people so far, or 50 million people using this template. It's not gonna, this language is not gonna be resonating with everyone all the time. And that's why you can cross things out. You can create your addendum with the language and the flavor that you want. And this wishes 3, 4, and 5 is really where the addendum shines, right? Where you can get really specific about the kind of fragrances, flavors, music, prayers, ways of being that are suited to you. And this will be a guide for your loved ones. They're giving a framework here of what a lot of people tend to want and like, which is a starting place. And then it allows you to push against it. I want this, I don't want this. How comfortable I want to be, and the pain medication, we could spend hours having a conversation about that alone, right? What are the alternatives to standard pain meds or standard pharmaceuticals that are given for all these things? What are the ways in which we want to move using pain as part of our journey or not at all? Where are we on the spectrum of that? So, yeah, well, I'm going to let y'all, more or less, we can do some breakout rooms, and I'm going to let y'all more or less navigate that. Annie, yes, go ahead.
So just a question has come up about the first person, third person, and how this is written, because it's very clear. I want, I do not want, if I show signs. And then the part that I don't know, it catches in my head where it says, please cross out anything you don't agree with. It seems like it should say, I have crossed out anything I don't agree with, because I wouldn't want it be read of like, well, I don't agree that we should be, whatever, getting a hold of a hospice. So I'm going to cross that out, And of course, we hope, that healthcare agent and family members are not going to do that. But it's just curious to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's in part an instruction booklet and in part a declaration. They're finding their way,
Yes.
and so I think that please cross out is for the person filling this out. We are filling this out, and it's speaking from the first person,
Right.
with some instructions. So
Right.
thanks. Yeah.
I guess we could just once it's done, we can just cross that, please cross out line.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this booklet and this 5 wishes is, again, a little bit more of a personable, relatable form. It's less structured and legal, which is a great entry point into literacy around this kind of stuff. We're going to talk a little bit more about the formal, more legal forms, which you're going to probably feel more comfortable with now that you've gone through this. But this is a humanizing way to talk about this stuff.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. All right, Christine, I saw your hand up earlier. Are you willing to read as much of Wish 5 as you want to read?
Surely, of course. Let me find it here. Oh, here it is. Okay. Yes. All right. So wish 5. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Good. Wish 5. My wish for what I want my loved ones to know. Please cross out anything that you don't agree with. I wish to have my family and friends know that I love them. I wish to be forgiven for the times I've hurt my family, friends, and others. I wish to have my family, friends, and others know that I forgive them for when they may have hurt me in my life. I wish for my family and friends to know that I do not fear death itself. I think it is not the end, but of a new beginning for me. I wish for all of my family members to make peace with each other before my death, if they can. I wish for my family and friends to think about what I was like before I became seriously ill. I want them to remember me in this way after my death. I wish for my family and friends and caregivers to respect my wishes, even if they don't agree with them. I wish for my family and friends to look at my dying as a time of personal growth for everyone, including me. This will help me live a meaningful life in my final days. I wish for my family and friends to get counseling if they have trouble with my death. I want memories of my life to give them joy and not sorrow. After my death, I would like my body to be buried or cremated. Circle 1. My body or remains should be put in the following location. The following person knows my funeral wishes. Let's keep going.
I think it's good to stop there. I just have to ask though, Christine, where are you from? Are you from Georgia with that beautiful Southern accent you have?
Actually, I'm from New Orleans.
New Orleans,
Yeah,
yeah.
New Orleans. Yeah. Thank you.
It is such a beautiful, rolling Southern accent. Thank you.
Good.
Okay, and yeah, there's a few other things here about how we want to be remembered, the memorial service, and you'll start to notice these forms and these ways of representing ourselves sort of start to overlap. I don't want to get too much in the after death components here because we're going to spend a whole bunch of time on that. But in general, the wish 5 again is an opportunity to have some place to start with this. I don't resonate with a lot of this language. I don't resonate with the word forgive personally. And so find your rhythm and your language for this. And again, I think that for me, I didn't really bother doing a lot of cross outs, but I really did spend some time with the addendum, and I'm going to go ahead and share the screen again to show you and remind you on my website where these resources are. So this end of life resources page, I just put the link again in the chat box. So if you need to navigate there. And this is the whole big, long website. You can have this link forever. And there's the addendum right here where you can say Lee's personal addendum in a Google Doc, Lee's personal addendum in a Word doc. Those are the two easiest ones to cut and paste out of. And so if we click on that, we can go ahead and see that wish 3, how comfortable I want to be. I have a bunch of bullet points under there. I talk about the foods I find nourishing, fasting, my nature connection, loose clothing and loose bed sheets, the kind of music I might want or quiet, having an altar, Please don't put cosmetics on my body. How I want people to treat me. I have some thoughts there. And then wish 5, what I want my loved ones to know. And even as I'm looking at this now, I know I need to redo this because I've grown and I've changed and I've shifted how I think about life and death and mysticism and spirituality. So I'm going to even update that. But again, that, these 5 wishes are an incredible opportunity to, convey to our beloveds what's important to us, and how helpful that can be. So I want to give you all a little time to digest and integrate these last 3 wishes, wish 3, 4, and 5. And I was going to send you out with your buddy. Does that sound right? Does that seem like the right place, right thing to do? Okay. So I think I have everybody, and I have a solution for you, Mary Ann, because Lori's partner is not here today. And I think Lori's partner is pretty limited availability. So I'm going to put Lori and Mary Ann together. And then the Annies got me a little confused because Annie P, I believe, is the Annie with the capital A here today. Is that right? Annie P. Okay. And so Annie and Audrey are together, and Annie and Pam, that Annie with the small a and Pam are together. Do I have that right? Okay, great. So I was going to plan to give you all 10 minutes. Does that feel like enough, or do you want a little bit longer time? There's just so much to talk about. Does 10 minutes feel like enough? And then you can schedule some time to be with each other. Okay, so if you feel like, gosh, I need more than 10 minutes, then go ahead. The first thing you do is schedule some time to talk this coming week. So you'll have more time together. But the invitation right now is to talk about wishes 3, 4, and 5. And the addendum and anything that is there for you around that. Little Annie. I love it. Okay. All right. See you all in 10. All right. Welcome back. Any thoughts, any sharings from that? Anyone who hasn't shared yet today? Anyone who hasn't shared yet today that might want to share? Margie, Audrey, Pam, Marissa, Cynthia, Lori, Margie.
Yeah. So again, when I look at these wishes and I think, well, like I've gone through childbirth 3 times, hard to know how I'm going to feel at the time. And what is it that is moving me along on this journey? Like if it's an accident versus an illness. But then I think, well, this is a living, what should I say, script. So not to feel like I have to have it all figured out as long as I'm of sound mind and can communicate and can be a work in progress. That's what that's what I tell myself anyway.
Absolutely. Really, really great way to say that. It's a living document, and, it changes moment by moment, and we update it as often as we do. And if we get to update it, before we die, great. If we die before we update it, then what falls back on what we thought when we were in our best thinking. And I think we can get hung up on getting it perfect, but I update mine every couple of years. And it goes back to that whole surrender to the mystery and whatever framework you want to use. Like, we can make our best plans, and what we're going to do is we're going to surf what we get, because that's life. And we all know at this age and stage, at whatever age and stage we are, is that we're going to surf whatever we get. So we do our best to plan and to call in our ideal, and we work with what we have. So beautiful summary. Thank you, Margie. Anyone else? Lori, Cynthia, Annie P, Mary Ann, Lori. You're muted, love.
Do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. I think that last week I was a little bit hung up on having it perfect. having it just something that was set in stone. And that takes a lot of pressure off of me. And so thank you for all of that.
Yeah.
And yeah, I was telling Marianne that I'm going to have a Zoom meeting with my children next Sunday and my husband, and they're calling themselves the Death Squad.
Yahoo! Death Squad.
So they think I'm on death's door or I've lost my mind. So they're in their 30s and 20s, late 20s. So
Yeah. Really throw them for a loop and start with a bunch of death jokes. That'll be fun.
I told them they're going to get shirts. I want them to wear Death Squad shirts when they're at my service.
Death Squad across the back, sort of like volunteer.
Yeah,
I love it.
yeah,
Oh, I love it. Like I'm fluorescent.
yeah. And then the healthcare agent would have HCA on the front, well, and they'll have numbers or whatever. They're valuable players.
I love it. I love it. Like team shirts. That's fabulous. I recently have this, there was recently a death in my community and it was very tragic, young woman, and it was very heavy. The whole several days of the process were really, really heavy and people were working through their stuff, and I understand it, but it inspired me to add into my addendum, like, could you have someone over in the corner laughing? Like just hire someone and have them just like throw dice and laugh, because you know what, this is all too heavy. So, whatever, however we want to do it. And yeah. And there is a thing called wailing or keening. I just recently took a keening workshop of this woman, Jude Lally, who some of you may know, who is in Western North Carolina. She's Scottish, and she did a bunch of research, and in her ancestral tradition is this idea of keening. And it used to be that you could hire a woman to come and keen at a funeral, which is to, cry and wail, and then it gets everybody's grief moving, right? So I'd love to see that tradition come back again. And could we have the keening on one hand and the laughing on the other? Like, how can we move this energy in our bodies? Yeah, Chris.
Yeah, I was realizing a lot of these things I'd want to rephrase. So it occurred to me, is it available as like a document that one can change the language in? Like,
not really. I mean, you could see what is available on the site. It gives you like a form to plug in and fill in on their site. It also is a sort of PDF you can get, but changing the whole thing, I don't think so. But I think like it's the letter of the law versus the spirit of the law. Like it's sort of the spirit of the thing is there. And then my sense is you can write in the margins or, write in your addendum, the sort of flavor of what you really want. So
you could create your own, really.
Totally
Right?
create your own.
Yeah.
Totally.
Mhm.
Yeah. And this gives you just some place to start from, which is
Right.
better than nothing. Yeah.
Right.
All right, let's move to page 10. I'm just going to do a quick summary of this page. For me, it's page 10. For you, it might be another page. It is basically the signature page. And it has your signature, the witness statement, and the notarization. So I usually wait until I get all of my paperwork that needs signatures and I get it all together, and then I'll go to the bank and be like, I got a bunch of signatures. So doing it at the bank, every bank has a notary. Your church might have a notary. There's also notary services that are pretty nominal. If you have a funeral home or other resources like that, they usually have notarization. So you want to get it witnessed, you want to get it notarized. It doesn't matter who the witnesses are. They could be bank employees, anything that needs notarization, they're familiar with that. So that's the signature page. And then there's this what to do after you complete the 5 wishes. So basically they just suggest that you give copies to people in your life, right? Like what I tend to do is have a digital version that it's in my Google Drive, or I get it all into one PDF document. If you don't know how to do that, get a tech savvy young person in your life and be like, I want to combine all these things into one document. And then put your name, and these are all my death documents, and then email it to the folks in your healthcare team, your kids, your spouse. I also like to print out copies, and then you can give that to your doctor or your patient advocate or other things. So once you get the whole kit and caboodle done, you can do it digitally and or physically. There's also a little cutout wallet card at the bottom. It's on page 11 for me. And you can keep it in your wallet and say, hey, my end of life directives are located at this location. The wisdom, the collective wisdom about where to keep kind of an original copy is in your freezer. And I know that sounds weird, but there's these plastic little snappy file folders, little plastic things that keep it from getting wet. And there's sometimes you can find these magnets that say matters of life and death inside. And the freezer is just like the standard place that we're all thinking to keep a copy, because if you keep it in some file, in some lateral file, or whatever file cabinet, it might be hard to find. People don't know how to reach for it quickly. They don't want to, it might be locked. Safe deposit box is a terrible place to keep it, because then how does somebody find your key to get it, right? So keeping this stuff in the freezer has become commonplace. And then digitally.
And fires. I was going to say, and fires.
Exactly. I mean, depending on how hot the fire is, your whole refrigerator may burn down. So, I don't know how helpful, but yeah, exactly. So congratulations, you just made it through the 5 wishes. Woohoo! Any other 5 wishes thoughts? And you can add anything to your checklist here if you want to, the notarization page, the addendum, add any dates, add anything to your checklist. Do you get this notarized, Teresa? I'm seeing your question. Do you get this notarized if it's not a legal document in your state? What's your state?
Oregon.
Huh. I wonder what, I would. I'm not sure how they're handling it. It's not a legal document. You might just have to do redundant documents, but I think it's still worth having because it's so heartful to guide your family with. That's a good question for other people in your state who have done this. My speaker is not working. I can hear you and you can't hear me. I'm working on it. Okay, Cynthia, thank you. Phyllis, question.
Yeah, I'm not sure if this is directly related to the 5 wishes. It might be, but there's seems to be frequent talk of give a copy to your lawyer. Make sure your lawyer knows this. Does everybody have a lawyer? Is that like common practice to have a lawyer? I certainly don't. And how do you get a lawyer?
Lawyers do this a lot, right? They have a series, they have a package, an end of life package that they do. And they'll say, this is X number of dollars. And it includes end of life directives and it includes financial stuff. And they do it all in one go. And plenty of people do that. It's not as intimate of a relationship with these documents when the lawyer's doing it, but it exists, it happens. And so if the lawyer is the go-to for the will or the trust or the family for any number of reasons, I think that's a great idea to give a copy to your lawyer. And some people have I hear this a lot. People are like, oh yeah, I did this 30 years ago with my lawyer and it's in my safe deposit box or it's in my files, and then they go to do it again and then this new stuff replaces the old stuff. So it's worthwhile if that lawyer is still part of the family's support team to give them an updated copy. Yes.
It's just a whole new thought to me to realize that people have lawyers.
Usually people with assets have lawyers. Usually those of us without assets don't have lawyers.
There, that explains it
yeah.
real clearly.
Yeah. Yeah.
People with assets have lawyers until they run out of assets paying the lawyers. Yeah.
Yeah, my friend Benita did this paperwork class with me, and then she went to a lawyer who she wanted to find a lawyer that didn't. Most lawyers will do the template thing. They're like, we have a system, we have a process, we have a template, you do it our way. She wanted to find a lawyer who would work by the hour and actually work through with her in an empowering way to make sure everything was aligned and in order. So she found a lawyer that did that. And I have that lawyer's name in Asheville, and I've talked to her, and she's willing to do that for other people. So if that's something you want, let me know and I can put that in the chat or email that to folks. I'll just do that as a standard practice. Did I put her name on my site? Let me just take a quick look. Yeah, I will either, yeah, I'll add that in the end and the specific. I'll add that in the wrap up email so you all have it. Is this lawyer?
Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, it is on here. It is on here. It's under financial resources. The North Carolina lawyer who is willing to work by the hour. Dykes Law Firm. That's her. I think it's Joanne. Is it Dykes? Joanne Dykes is her name. So that's on my webpage. And you might also ask other lawyers if you're in a different state or something like, hey, I've done this course. I have a lot of empowerment. I don't really want to use your templates. What I'd really like for you to do is to review all my stuff and tell me what you think about it. And you might just call around and see if a lawyer is willing to do that with you. They might learn something too.
Oh, cool. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay. All right, how is everyone feeling? We ready to move on? Hold on, let me see your faces. Are we ready, feeling ready to move on? Okay, great. Congratulations on the end of life, on the 5 wishes and the addendum. And I wanna bring us back to this categories of end of life paperwork to just ground us in where we are. So we've been working on the left category, the living healthcare in general, and we're going to do that some more. There's a lot of paperwork in this category, which means how do you want to be navigating your end of life while you're still alive? That's what that category means. I'm living and I want to be guided in this way. And so we've worked on the 5 wishes, and then there's a couple other things I want to talk about here before we take a break. One is called the healthcare power of attorney, or the medical power of attorney. This is like wish 1, sometimes wish 1 and wish 2 combined. And what I've learned is that some healthcare professionals find that the 5 wishes document is a little too woo-woo or too complex or too long, or they don't want to flip through all these pages, or it's not really, what they're used to legally. And so I think it's worth filling out a standalone separate healthcare power of attorney, which is legally binding. Even though the 5 wishes says it's legally binding, some people and some institutions are going to be more comfortable with the healthcare power of attorney. I do have a link on my page. That's a form that is sort of a redundant, slightly more detail, and maybe a little bit more overwhelming. So don't do it if you don't want to do it, but it really does, you can sort of see that it's framed in a legal language, and it really specifies what the healthcare agent does, and some specifics of before death and after death. So if you feel inspired and you want to cover all your bases, that's another thing to do. Again, redundancy in this context is good. Different people perceive different forms and different documents as more familiar. Karen, last week, Karen Sanders talked about medical release forms. Do you remember, did she give us a certain link to some? I don't remember, but I have a HIPAA section on my website. That is the Health Insurance Portability and Accessibility Act or something like that. HIPAA is basically like private patient information can only be released in certain contexts. So if you feel like you're going to want a patient advocate or you're going to want someone to be reviewing your case and giving input on your case, if your healthcare agent is going to want that information, then you want to probably get a hold of some medical release forms and just have them in your paperwork. And, name the people that you want stuff to be released to, like if your patient advocate is going to be someone like Karen is going to be interfacing with your acupuncturist or your, dementia specialist or your cancer specialist or whatever it is, then there's one central person to release the medical forms to. And you may not know that right now. And I don't know how urgent it is until or unless there's, sort of a medical need, but those are forms that are great to have in your packet. Chris.
Yeah, I mean, my impression is that you have to sign a new form with every medical institution or practitioner. Is that not the case? Is there?
It may be, these medical release forms are a little bit new to me, and Karen, talked about them last time. I'm not sure. That does sound right. But if you have a patient advocate who's sort of umbrella managing it, maybe that person can then have enough information to talk to these other providers. It's a good question. And they probably vary from state to state. Let's see, what do I have on here? I have a HIPAA section. Medical release in HIPAA. And then there's a medical release form by state, and you can it's an e-form process. So you can fill out your information. It'll fill all the blanks in and then print it out for you. And you can also check with your local people if you want to know more specifics. Any thoughts on that? Okay. This dementia directive, it's dementiadirective.org. This is also linked on my site, but I'm going to put it in the chat right now. And it's free. You can print it out. And it's very similar to the 5 wishes language. You'll sort of feel familiar with it. The standard advice is that advanced directives don't usually cover dementia because it's such a different kind of thing. And it's the number one reason people lose their ability to guide their own care. So it's a way to ensure that, sorry, I just want to mute you, Phyllis, you're good. So families face pretty difficult decisions when people have dementia. And so if there's this thing filled out ahead of time about what you want, can be really helpful. It's very stressful and sometimes can go on for decades to care for someone with dementia. So this can be used sort of as a standalone document. It can, I would say do the 5 wishes and then also do this. Let's see, what else I wanna. This is the basic framework. They have a section for mild dementia, a section for moderate dementia, and a section for severe dementia. And these are the 4 choices, and you'll see how they're familiar to the choices that were happening in the 5 wishes. And the first choice is I want to live as long as I can. I want full efforts to prolong my life, including efforts to restart my heart if it stops beating. The next one is to receive treatments to prolong my life. But if my heart stops beating or I can't breathe, I would not want those things restarted, right? Allow me to die peacefully. And then it says, reason why. If I took a sudden turn for the worse, then my dementia would likely be worse if I survived, and this would not be an acceptable quality of life for me. The next choice is to only receive care in the place where I'm living. I do not want to go to the hospital, even if I were very ill. I do not want to be resuscitated. If a treatment such as antibiotics might keep me alive longer or could be given in the place where I was living, I would want such care. But if I got worse, I would not want to go to an emergency room or hospital. I would want to be allowed to die peacefully. I would not, and there says the reason why, I would not want the possible risks and trauma which would come from being in the hospital. And then the last choice is to receive comfort-oriented care only, focused on relieving my suffering, pain, anxiety, and breathlessness. I would not want any care that would keep me alive longer. So you start to see this is the same framework as the 5 wishes, and it's done for each section of the dementia, mild, moderate, severe. So you can work with that document because now you're really familiar with this framework. Any questions on that? Okay. Okay. We're gonna go to the most. Karen talked about the most form at length last week, so I think it saved us a little bit of time. But it's basically wish to, which is what kind of medical intervention treatment to keep me alive do I want, right? And again, we're talking about redundancy because when you have a big chart, if you're in the hospital or if you've gone through a bunch of treatment for something, they have this form, it's super fluorescent and it's in your chart and they flip it open and look for it. Like they're trained to look for these bright pink and bright yellow documents. Karen said you can't get this, but that's not true. I have actually ordered these and they're on my website. Under, if I were in class with you in person, I would give you some because I ordered like 200 of them before the pandemic. Now I have all these most forms. Specific medical orders. It's under specific medical orders. It's called the most document and the do not hesitate to order both these forms. These are North Carolina forms, so it's not going to help you if you are somewhere else, but you might be able to look in your state. And I understand why they're hard to get because they're not useful unless they have a doctor's signature. So, you know, I haven't personally done this most form and gotten a doctor's signature or the do not resuscitate. You know, those of us that are fairly in good health and not really walking around with a chronic illness don't usually have these forms signed and ready to go. But you can do them. I've heard that people without any medical condition have gone to their doctor and done these forms just to have access to them. And we've talked about this several times. It's worth repeating. If you're in some kind of accident somewhere at home or out, like the emergency medical personnel are not going to wait to find your forms. They're just going to revive you. And so again, we do our best to say what we want and then we get what we get. We surf the waves of life, but it's worth doing them if you feel inspired. And then Karen went through, you know, these specific things, and we talked about that when we talked about wish to, you know, sort of like it starts with the most invasive life-saving measures at the top, right? CPR, and then it goes sort of down from there, the antibiotics and then fluids and other things. So it's in these sections. And then, of course, the do not resuscitate form is, you know, like if my heart has stopped, I've stopped breathing, do not bring me back to life. And, you know, we went so far as to talk about this last week where people get this tattooed on their chest because they know how likely it is for medical personnel to disregard a bracelet, a do not resuscitate bracelet, or a form that's even like taped to the bedpost or taped to the door, or held in the healthcare agent's hand. And so, even if they have a tattoo, sometimes it doesn't stop people, but it goes a much longer way. So, let's stop there. Let's stop there. Any questions on any of these other forms? The healthcare power of attorney, most, the DNR, the medical release. Audrey, yes.
So my question was, people bring the brightly colored forms to their doctors while they're healthy and ask them to sign it while they're brightly colored and healthy?
It depends on the doctor. I've heard of some doctors saying, "You're fine, I'm not signing this. You're not dying, I'm not signing this," right? And I've heard of other people saying, yeah, the doctor's willing to sign it. You just want to keep, you're doing this class, you want to get your paperwork in order. This is important to you. And the doctor's like, sure, here, sign this. And when you're going in for any kind of medical procedure, at a certain age, probably they say, hey, we have these forms for you to fill out. And they will say, they want to probably encourage you, if you're just going for foot surgery or, some standard thing, they probably want to not encourage you not to fill out.
Oh yeah, then you wouldn't, yeah.
But that's up to you. That's completely up to you. Mm-hmm.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yeah. I mean, these forms are, cheap. They're 40 cents a piece or something, which is why I ordered so many of them. So, the stamp costs more than the actual form. But you certainly can order them, or you might be able to go to some health system. They might have them there, or your doctor might have them. You could call and say, listen, I'm getting my paperwork in order. I am, or I'm not actively dying. Like, I'd like these forms do you all do that? Are you willing to fill this form out with me? Other questions, other thoughts? All right, how are you all feeling about taking a break? Okay, we're going to get into death stuff next. How does 20 minutes feel to you? Does that feel like enough? Okay, so what does that mean? Let's come back at 4:45. It's a little more than 20 minutes. Okay, see you soon. All right, welcome back. Does anyone who hasn't spoken yet today want to check in? Annie P, Cynthia, Marianne, Marissa, Pam, any of you want to check in? Cynthia.
Well, because I'm sort of OCD about this stuff, I guess. I have my DNR and my most already done. but, you know, it's a little bit, I mean, the doctor signed it and everything, but, you know, you have to be careful when it's going to be used. You know, that's the only thing I would say. I mean, there's a time to take it with you and a time not to take it with you. So, you know, you have to weigh out sort of how sick you are or what the situation is.
Are you saying that there are going to be times that resuscitation and intervention are things you might want and times where are there things you might not want that you need?
Right. I mean, I would,
Mhm.
EMS shows up, you know, I mean, it's a very fine line as to, you know, how, whether you can be managed or not, you know, based on like if your heart stops and I'm not breathing, well, then I don't really want to be revived. I mean, if I'm not going to have quality of life afterwards, but so it's a real tricky thing, but I did go ahead and get it done.
Great. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, this is where we have to surrender to the mystery on some level. Absolutely. Thank you. Audrey, Pam, Annie P, Marissa, anybody else want to check in? Anybody else that I missed? I'm not fully tracking, but just wanting to make space for folks who haven't gotten a chance to speak.
Oh, I would just, in conjunction to what you just said, I would just think that it's important to know that the doctor that knows her condition knows what her 5 wishes are in order to carry them out, rather than just having some random person at Mission Hospital or whatever carry them out. Because I think it's important to know that they are ready to look at what her condition is before just looking at those, you know, the brightly colored pages.
Right. Yeah. So that's a beautiful point, which is, you know, when we're in relationship with people that know us and care about us and have a depth of understanding of our process, it's really different than when we're dealing with an EMT or an emergency room personnel. And that's for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, well, let's go into the death components. Let me share my screen with you. The Bhagavad Gita says, death is just a change of clothing. Death is just a change of clothing. So any of those forms that we just did, I want to encourage you to write on your checklist if you feel like you want to get to those. You know, now's a good time to make a note to yourself, to get with your buddy, to put a date, to have a sense of when you want to do those by so you can help hold each other accountable in a beautiful, loving, supportive way. And we're leaving the realm of living healthcare paperwork, and we're moving into death care paperwork and the death phase in general. So there's a lot of choices for the body after death, more and more every day. And we're going to talk about them. So here's just a few statistics. Every year, 50 to 60 and more million people die every year worldwide. Burials in the US are unique in the sort of first world way that we do things. the chemicals and materials that are buried with each body are pretty astronomical, and it equals a lot, right? So 30 million board feet of hardwoods are buried every year. Almost 3,000 tons of copper and bronze, over 100,000 tons of steel, 1.5 million tons of concrete, and almost 1 million gallons, 850 gallons of embalming fluid are buried every year. And then cremation isn't really a whole lot better, honestly. It releases more than 500,000 tons of greenhouse gases and lots of mercury, right? Like the mercury in teeth. So more than half of all people in the US woo! Linda, go ahead and mute yourself. I just muted you. More than half of the people in the US that die are cremated. It's become more and more popular. And it emits about 500 pounds of carbon dioxide per body. So it's a big industry with a lot of waste. So, you know, I've been sort of asking myself the question, like, what are the options? What are the other alternatives? And there's lots of them. There's green burial. Anywhere in the country, you can search for conservation burial, green burial. There's an alliance called the Conservation Burial Alliance. In Western North Carolina, we are really lucky. We have the Carolina Memorial Sanctuary. And what these green burial and conservation burial organizations do is they adhere to certain standards, right? They keep the cemetery in natural state. They let the ecosystem be sort of wild. They have very minimal headstones. They require super simple practices. Like if you're going to have a coffin, it's got to be a simple pine box only. None of that other stuff is buried in the ground. Or you can use a shroud. They have rules against embalming fluids and other things. So they're the place to go to if you want to do more of a green burial. And there's several of them. They're in all countries. From my perspective, the way we sort of need to go. So green burial is it's a great option. There's also some really amazing, innovative stuff emerging, and this stuff is all on my website. Recompose is a place out in Washington State, and for about $6,000-ish, you can ship a body out there, they compost it, and they send you back the soil. So they have all these composting systems that they do. They've been fully approved. I think there was a TED Talk early on about it. Really cool organization. There's also this infinity burial suit. There was also a TED Talk on this one. It's a handcrafted garment, and you put it on the deceased, and then it's like a biomatrix, like it contains mushroom spores and microorganisms that help the decomposition of the body, helps to remove and neutralize the toxins from that body. So again, the mercury fillings or other things, and then it transfers those nutrients to the plants in a more effective way. Very, very cool. So the end result is that, you know, the body is transformed into these beautiful, earth-friendly nutrients. There's this egg capsule, the Capsula Mundi. It's an egg-shaped pod. They're imagining putting people in a fetal position into this pod, burying it, and then planting a tree over it, because this sort of mirrors in some ways the roots of a tree. They currently have these egg-shaped biodegradable urns that you can put ashes in, and it sounds like from their website that they're still sort of working on the prototype for the actual body pod. But, you know, these are the kinds of things to stay in touch with. And so what if cemeteries were like filled with trees, right? With small plaques, with a name, but these beautiful trees that were a legacy of this person. there's this cool thing called aquamation, which is basically an alternative to cremation, and it's called alkaline hydrolysis. And it like, I don't know exactly, but it almost like sounds like decomposing a body in lye, like, those murder shows where people like try to get rid of a body and then they like go soak it in lye. Like, this is what I think. This is something like that. It's a non-combustible, non-fire cremation. So it's basically reducing the body to some kind of ash through this alkaline hydrolysis process. So you can check that out. That's on my website also. There's donation of body, certainly donation of body to science. People have heard about that. And there's all kinds of resources for that. And then there's this really cool, probably I'm the only one who thinks it's cool, body farms. And body farms are researching decay and decomposition. So they put a body right smack on the ground, or 6 inches under, or 1 foot under, or under a little bit of leaf litter. And then they're doing all this research about how quickly, what happens, and they're all these universities, there's a handful of them all over the country, are doing this body farm research. And there happens to be one in Western Carolina University is doing it. So you can donate your body to this decomposition experiment, which is really cool. And then they have, they sign these contracts or whatever with your family, and they get you back the bones or whatever it is that you want to bury. So that's another alternative. I see you laughing, Audrey. Yeah, donating to science is another option. And then home burials and home funerals. There's something called the Home Funeral Alliance that is advocating for and educating about how to have a home burial and a home funeral. This is a lot of what I have to offer because I've done a lot of this. So I'm going to show you some slides about that. But you can bury at home in all 50 states. It's actually way more accessible than any of us really realized. There's resources out there online, and there's books written. You have to be a certain number of feet from a house or from a water source, but we can take care of our dead. Like this is not, this is accessible to us to take care of our dead, even if you live in the suburbs, right? Like probably rural and suburbs way easier than in the city, but we can be doing more of this death care ourselves. So I'm going to take you on a little journey of how it's been in my world. So some of us learned about the home funeral and death care from our friends at the Center of End of Life Transitions. And put that link here. I don't know if she's still doing this home funeral and death care midwife training, but it's an amazing training. And we also, in my community, Earth Haven Eco Village is where we've communally, in the context of a village, been caring for the dying and the dead. And it's been bringing a lot of these different traditions together and sort of finding our way along with our training. But this is a picture of us tending to Kim Chi the day after she died. And we did this beautiful process of tending her body, washing her body, talking to her, singing to her, telling her life story over the course of about 5 hours. And my mentors, the Buddhist folks, really believe that the spirit stays with the body for 72 hours, for up to 72 hours. And so that there's a transition, not only a transition for us as the living, but a transition for the person that died and is transitioning to the spirit world, so that this communication, this process, this tending of the body is the transition for them and for us. And also a reminder that, the oxytocin, which is the bonding hormone, is and the love hormone is very high during the death process, right? It's in the highest amounts during death. during birth and during orgasm. These are the sort of neural transmitters that are happening, right? And it ripples out into the community. So those of us closest to the death get the highest dosages, and then everybody in the concentric circles out that are supporting that process are also hit with that. So it's very, very bonding. And ceremony is not, it's not again just for the living. It's for all of us. It's for sort of the more than human world, right? And I believe that we are speaking to our own souls when we do ceremony and ritual. So what we have done is tended the body in the first day. Sometimes we've had to go get the body from the morgue, which we've done many times and is perfectly legal. You can go to the morgue and say, that's my beloved and I want that body and I'm taking it home and I'm going to do a home funeral. We've done that a lot. And then we set up an altar after we do the initial preparation and the storytelling and the singing that lasts usually half a day or even a day. We set up an altar in a public space. If someone's home or in our community was like sort of a common space so that anyone can come during visitor hours. And there's always someone with the body for the next 3 days. Someone sleeps in that space. The body's never left alone. And we use this dry ice, which maybe Meredith will talk about today, dry ice wrapped in fabric to keep the body cool. We try to keep the room very cool. We have flowers and photos and candles, and then opportunities for people to be near the body for those 3 days. So this is Kim Cheese. This is someone kneeling in front of the body. This is another beloved that died in our community, Patricia. This is a mother and a child visiting the funeral and the grief altar of a friend, Chuck Marsh, who had died. And from my perspective, children being part of death really normalizes it and it educates about the cycles of life. Certainly in my context and in Village, we have access to that because we have a farming life. And so children get to see the birth and the death and the sex cycles that are natural, inherent in the farming life. But when humans honor this in a really sacred way, it's also passing on rituals that normalize and make sacred the death process. We have learned from one of our beloved ancestors, Soban Fusome, who I introduced at the very beginning, to have 3 altars in a space. One is the grief altar where the body is on, and one is the forgiveness altar, which we drape in blue, and then another is the ancestor altar, which we drape in red, and everybody can bring photos of their ancestors. It's an opportunity when someone dies to be closer to the death community. So that's the forgiveness altar, and this is a beautiful ancestor altar. And some of you may have traditions from your spiritual teachings that you incorporate and use. Most spiritual traditions have death systems of honoring death. In my community, we do all the grave digging ourselves. It's usually a pretty gendered thing. The guys do the grave and the women tend to the body, but it doesn't have to be that way. We're mixing up gender in a bunch of ways, but digging a grave by hand will work out some grief. Let me tell you, it is not an easy task, and getting out there with the body and actually digging the grave. It takes the 3 days that the body is preparing. These land-based, place-based traditions are there for a reason, right? It's the rhythm. It's the rhythm of how we get to work out our process. And usually on the 3rd day, we have a public funeral where people come. This is our council hall, a bunch of people outside. I don't remember whose funeral this was, but we've had funerals where hundreds of people have been in attendance. And they've said it's been life-changing, really. It's a very sacred process. This was a picture of some of us. We had Kim Chee's clothes and belongings and art supplies all out, and she had worn these incredibly eccentric, artful, colorful clothes. And so we all put on her clothes as we went to the funeral. And we cover the body, we wrap it and we tie it in with these sacred ties. We put flowers all in it, and then the head is covered. And this body now is ready to move to the graveside and to be buried. And we have this canvas tote that we have used with all of our bodies. It has 4 or 5 handles on each side. So people who aren't as strong as big, hulky men can carry this. I mean, we've had a team of women carrying a body because there's more people on each side, and it's super easy to hold on to and get close to. And so we don't bury this tote in the ground. We reuse this tote. We have a way to pull it out once the body is by the graveside. This is us moving in procession to the funeral burial location, and this is a wrapped body by the side of the grave. We bury in shrouds. Some people like coffins. You can do a simple pine box or other things. Shrouds are becoming more popular. I have a friend who does a seed to shroud project where you grow your own flax. You process it, you make it into a form, a yarn, and then you weave your own shroud. It's like a project. It's a whole art project that she works on, from seed to shroud. Here's another body by the grave site, and here is a picture of the body in the center. It's probably kind of small with a whole bunch of people sitting around. And some prayers are said at the grave. And here's lowering the body into the grave. And I have a little video here I can show you. So Kimchi is the woman who wanted to really offer her death as an educational opportunity. And the Facebook group is Positive Deathing by Kimchi, and there's a link on my page, and there's all kinds of fun things. This is at the end of the burial. She was so well beloved. There were probably 300 or 400 people at her funeral, and she died. I think it was the 16th of February, and her birthday was the 20th of February. So she was buried on her birthday. Which was just such a beautiful cycle. And so you'll hear, I'm going to play this for you. There's a friend of ours playing the fiddle, and folks are saying, "Happy birthday, Kimchi." Whoops. Sorry, I'm starting over.
Happy birthday.
And here is the mound of soil decorated with flowers, and generally we let that settle, and then a tree gets planted. There's a tradition in my community about birth and death corn, and planting corn, and growing corn and processing corn 9 months after the person has passed, like they've been born into the spirit world in a new way. There's all kinds of beautiful rituals and ceremonies, but I will stop here and we can talk about some of that. Stephen Levine says, "Fear of death is fear of life." Any thoughts about any of that, those alternative burial components, the home funeral and home burial process that we've been through? Any thoughts, any questions from anyone? Annie P.
Do that. I absolutely love all this. And I went to, it was so neat. It was so synchronistic. I have a friend who does the stones that go on the sites at Carolina Memorial Sanctuary. And I got to go there and have made an appointment and feel very delighted and would love to do something like this in a beautiful, beautiful way and want to learn more about it. And what is really surreal about it is she would get one of my closest friends since I've moved to Asheville would be the person that would get to engrave my stone. And I said something to her about it. She goes, wow, that is really surreal. And it's just so cool. Because I definitely believe in the beauty of all this and that it's a celebration and we're not done. So I feel really blessed, you know, that this class came my way. I just love the synchronicities that are occurring in my life. And this is just one more facet of it. And with the work I'm doing out there in the world, this feels like it's synchronistic to come to me now because I think we're going to have a lot of death that's going to be occurring in the next 10 years. And I think the more that I can have an understanding to support people that are going through it, the better. So I just feel really grateful and blessed that this, you know, came my way. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, Carolina Memorial Sanctuary, as you know, they only allow very small stones, right? It's not some big gravestone, like very small. And so the engraver has to be very talented to get what needs to get on those stones. So yeah, beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah, but they're just right because they're more minimalist and
Yeah.
simple, and you can still get some sort of a saying. And I just love seeing that people are putting flowers and crystals and all that different stuff on it, and would love to know that this precedes it, where you get to do this really neat celebration that I've not seen before. So I'm really excited. Thank you.
Yeah. Christine.
Lee, thank you for this introduction to another way of you know, going to the spirit world. In 91, I actually read to my brother from Stephen Levine's book, Who Dies, as he was being cremated. The roar of the fire was so enormous, I had no idea about the toxicity. And I thought I was doing him a favor, you know, I thought I was doing him good. And of course my intention was, but oh my Lord, I have never, and even after the cremation process was done, there was still, and I'll say, I hope nobody is too offended, there was still chunks of his flesh, you know, that was still there. So after had to be 2.5, 3 hours, I don't remember, but the beauty, the only mainly beautiful thing about this is I think he was terrified of dying. And I could feel, I swear I could feel when his spirit lifted. I mean, it was just extraordinary. And so that I will never forget. And my mom was so grateful that I was with him. So, but anyway, thank you for these beautiful alternatives that I will definitely choose one of them. Yeah.
Yeah. Are you saying that he was cremated in like an outdoor, some kind of system, a different kind of system?
No, it wasn't. It was you know, a pretty standard park lawn, you know, in New Orleans. But I was in the room next door reading to him, and hearing that enormous roar of that fire.
Yeah.
Oh my God. So
yeah, I mean, I've heard people asking about outdoor funeral pyres, and like I've heard some people exploring and experimenting, like what's possible there. You have to get the fire so hot. So, you know, all as we're getting more conscious about how we live and die, I think all of these things are being explored. Yeah. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
And the spirit with the body, you know, we've had, you know, been blessed with a lot of death in our lives. And we've gotten pretty good at that too, that, you know, this idea that the spirit can stay for 3 days. And, you know, usually you can tell. It's fascinating because there's a certain color or hue or presence to the body, even though it's dead, that it changes. Something shifts. When the spirit goes, it's like there's more ashen, it's more gray, it's more vacant, and there's a difference. It's subtle, but it's different, and I've experienced that myself.
What was interesting is, as Westy, my brother, his cremation was delayed, and I wonder I don't know if it was 3 days, but it may have been. Yeah. Anyway, thank you,
Annie.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's the way I've been thinking all along, that I want to be buried. I heard something like the amount of fuel to burn a body in cremation is the equivalent of driving across the US from coast to coast 3 times. I don't know if that's true exactly, but it just was like, oh, I would rather die the way I live and try to do something more like this. And fortunately, where I am, we do have a place, and I'm going to look into it. I had, just to give other people time to talk, I just had 2 really practical, interesting questions I thought I would ask around this. One is that when I've been with people who have died and their bodies have stayed a little longer in the place before they're picked up because family wants to come, there is the release of body fluids and such, and it's smelly. It's really smelly. So what I'm curious about is when the body goes to the morgue, as it needs to, how we live, and then you would go and retrieve the body and bring back. I imagine there's just, there's cleanup, and maybe there's continual cleanup to keep the body clean and to keep the atmosphere feeling comfortable for people to come visit. So that's one question. And then the other is that canvas bag. Did you make it, or is there a place where you think we can buy such a thing?
We bought it, and that's a great question. I'll make myself a note to remind myself where we got it. And I can add that to the website and send it to you all. Canvas body tote. You could also search for the canvas body tote, but I'll ask. So to answer your first question, Meredith's coming, so let's ask her some of those detailed questions. But padding, towels and other disposable padding can go under. Try to get the body from the morgue and start the process as soon as possible, so that by 72 hours or 80 hours, you're moving towards the burial process. The dry ice needs to be changed all the time. So you're rolling the body, pulling that out, packing new dry ice in, wrapping that in the fabrics, putting that back. So you're tending that body, it is a full team effort of tending that body, and then keeping the room cool. If it's warm out, obviously having air conditioning. If it's cool, opening the windows, however. And yes, we mostly haven't had a smell issue. And we're getting, you're not probably when you get very close underneath the body, but keeping the body cool is really the ticket. And Meredith will probably know more specifics about that. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Who else? Other thoughts? Any perspectives here? How are you all integrating this, digesting this, sitting with this? Phyllis.
I could share. I will try to be brief because I'm actually writing this story down as a book. So I could talk an entire book, but my mom's, she knew she was dying, and she had already researched green cemeteries because she wanted to be buried in a natural state. And Baha'i law requires, our religious law requires, that the body be buried an hour from the place of death. And she was sad because the green cemeteries that she knew of were more than an hour away. And right before she died, through a very mysterious story that I won't share, but she said the name of Michelle Skeel, and we looked her up, and we found out through contacting a bunch of people that there was this new Carolina Memorial Sanctuary, which was 20 minutes away from where my mom died. And so my brother and sister went to the sanctuary and took pictures of all the various areas of the cemetery. And so she got to choose. She said, I want to be buried in the trees that overlook the park or the creek. And the entire process of, she died at home. We wrapped her body. We washed and wrapped her body. We had the hospice nurse helped us, we're so grateful for that, because she did the cleanup of the body right after she died. And that was helpful to us. But then the whole process of you know, the wagon taking her body to the burial site and the family following the wagon. The children helped to put dirt into the grave after she was buried. So we have video of the little, you know, the 3-year-old with the little shovel. So it was all very natural. And the headstones, my dad had died previously and been cremated, and he was adamant that he be buried with my mom. But because my mom was a Baha'i and traveling and she didn't know where she was going to be buried, she said, I won't know till I die. And so the whole thing was keep the urn close to mom. And when she dies, put the urn in the gravesite with mom, because he kept saying, I'm with her. I want to be with her. And so when she died, the Carolina Memorial Sanctuary, they did something with the ashes to make them non-toxic. And they buried them in the ashes with her body. And her gravestone has her name and the Baha'i symbol on it. And my dad's gravestone has his name and an arrow pointing to hers, and it says, I'm with her. And it's perfect. And all the people that come by there and they see it, they laugh. They don't know the backstory, you know. But the whole process of working with them is phenomenal.
Yeah.
It just a whole network of people that support you through this process. It's amazing.
Right. So the team of people led by Caroline Young, who runs Carolina Memorial Sanctuary, is also, they were my mentors from Center of End of Life Transition. Same.
Perfect. Yeah. Yeah.
Meredith, welcome, welcome. So good to have you. Thanks. We just finished a section on after death options, and I talked at length about the home funeral, home burial processes we've used at Earth Haven, and there's just a couple more thoughts and questions, and then I can turn it over to you. So Jess, why don't you go next?
So this is there's a part of me that is like, here's what I don't want, here's what I'm okay with, and I don't really care about a lot of the details. I always thought like, this is exactly what I want and I'm good and here it is. And then I realized that because I don't have too many opinions about what happens to my body after I die, that it's an opportunity that I am taking to ask my loved ones what they want. And so things that I thought that they wanted when we started talking about it, they actually don't want. And so it's turning into this interesting process of having them now, while as far as I know, I'm not in the death process at the moment. It's turning into like this really interesting collaborative project to figure out what they want. And so it was interesting to see all these options and thinking like, oh, I have this like menu that I can present to people of some other options too. So it's just interesting because I have like a couple things I would like and that's it. And then they kind of get the choose your own adventure. What do you want me to have in place as well? So it's quite a bizarre set of planning that I didn't anticipate.
Yeah, it's really a jumping off point for more conversation. Beautiful. Yeah. Yeah, really good. Meredith, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks so much for having me. I love it. This is always a joke that this is my jobby, kind of my hobby, like helping people with end of life paperwork. Because my regular job is that I work at a conventional funeral home. And can you hear me okay? I don't have to use this, but I just thought, okay. So yeah, if you're ready for me to start, I just wanted to introduce myself. My name is Meredith Springs. I grew up in High Point, North Carolina, and I've lived in Western North Carolina for about 17 years. And I have two basically teenage boys. They're like almost both teenagers now. And then let's see, when Cohen, my youngest son, when he was in preschool, my grandfather died. And I called him Paw Paw, and Paw Paw always said, when I die, I want you and your brother to do my funeral. And we would say, sure, Paw Paw, will do your funeral. And he was just like really, he was an unconventional kind of character. And so having a really cookie cutter kind of funeral service wouldn't have suited him. So when my brother and I, well, we were going to visit him, and we were going to go see him on a Friday, and he passed away that Thursday. So then that Sunday we had a memorial service for him. And I always say that that was not the easiest thing that I've ever done, but it was just one of the best things that I'd ever done for our family. It was just like really, it just suited him so well. And it was really healing process. So my come from as a funeral director is that there's a right fit for every family. And people generally default to what they've seen before and what they've done before in their family. But I always like to remind people that traditions in your family can change. Like you can change those traditions. I feel like in my family, it will probably be a tradition to be green buried. My mom's really a big advocate of green burial. She lives in Greensboro and is on the board of All Souls Natural Burial Ground. And so it's just part of our discussion in the family about, it's kind of her hobby as well, talking about end of life things. And I don't really get to have, I'm very grateful for this opportunity to give good information to your group and field questions, because a lot of this stuff just doesn't come up very often, realistically at the funeral home. And in my process of becoming a funeral director, that was the very first class that I ever took turned out to be a class about home funerals. And I didn't even know that existed. And I was just like really taken with it, with how much sense that made, and my oldest son, he was 7 years old at the time. And I just thought, I would absolutely keep caring, if something happened to any of my loved ones, I would want to care for them like I've always taken care of them. And so now I feel like I would know how to do that in a lot of different situations. So when we talk about these things, it's obviously easier for us to talk about how to proceed after like a home hospice death, because we have time to plan, and then the person is already, your loved one's already at your home. And so you can have kind of like a vigil space already set up. But there's just so many things to talk about. I just have some notes of things to go over briefly, and then just would love to hear your questions, and just empower you that whatever is a good fit for you and your family, that's it's probably possible. It just might take some planning or ice packs at minimum, and I have like a freezer full in my garage that I've given away and let people borrow. And I'm gonna keep those ice packs because that's really about all you need, So I do want to say congratulations, you guys, for doing this, because I know it's not easy to think about these things, and you really are changing your families and changing our culture, by openly discussing these things and seeing what the options are. And it doesn't mean that you have to like nail down exactly what you want, but just any amount of discussion is going to be so helpful, because as a funeral director, one of the most painful things that I've ever seen is when someone just had no idea if someone wanted to be buried or cremated or anything, like they just didn't, they felt like no matter what they did, it was going to be the wrong thing. And that's so hard. But it's a really special time when someone dies. You're in like a way different headspace, and planning ahead can really open up space to have some beautiful experiences. And like I said before, people really kind of default to the traditions in their family because they don't know what to do. So then they just do whatever they've seen before. But as we see more things and as we like experience home funerals and expose, people have exposure to that, then it's like, yeah, that's what I want. And they, it can change our culture. So 2 questions that I found helpful in grounding the conversation about your wishes are, there is a physical reality to where you want your body to be forever. So whether that's a cemetery or where you want your cremated remains to be, that's going to apply to every situation. So that can be a way of grounding thinking about it, because it can be really emotionally overwhelming. And then another physical reality is that there is going to be a last time that someone sees you. And sometimes you might just get an image or something, or have a dream, or just some aspect of that that's important to you. So if you can kind of imagine what that moment would be like, and it's fine. Sometimes people say like, oh, I don't want anyone to see me. Like that's something really for people to go on. And here at the funeral home, people that might have chosen an open casket kind of traditional funeral, what we call traditional funeral. But then their loved one always said like, I don't want people gawking at me when I'm dead. So they have a closed casket. And so communicating those 2 things, where you would want your body buried or your cremated remains, and then what you would like for a viewing or not a viewing. Those will apply in any situation. I think that those are grounding conversations. And I'm sorry if I'm repeating things, but I did want to just give a definition of green burial. So generally, then a person would not be embalmed, because the whole point is that you're letting the body decompose. And I think that the Green Burial Council, they've kind of backed off on that, because really, I mean, the danger of formaldehyde is in the people it's really for embalmers, like for living people being around formaldehyde. And of course, it's going to make the body decompose a lot slower, but really it's not like so much of a danger to the ground, because once the chemical is fixated with the proteins, then it just is like water. I mean, chemically, it's just water. So, if somebody really wanted to be green buried, but say they had to have an autopsy and they really had to be embalmed to be viewed, nothing's really going to preclude you being able to be green buried if that's your wish. But so generally you would not be embalmed, and then be in a biodegradable container with no outer burial container. So some cemeteries are going to require an outer burial container, which is like a tremendous amount of concrete to put in the ground. But that's because then the cemetery stays flat, so at some place like Carolina Memorial Sanctuary, they mound up the dirt because things are going to settle. So that's, just like a simple definition of green burial, and that typically they would not allow like upright engraved monuments, so like tombstones. But that's why they're at special cemeteries that look more natural, and that people would have an expectation that that's what they would look like, more natural. There are some other options like alkaline hydrolysis, which there's actually a facility which is, basically renders the same product as flame cremation. And there is a facility that I visited and met the owner in Shelby, North Carolina. And it's pretty comparable cost to cremation, flame cremation. And the guy who owns that unit, he just like doesn't believe in fire cremation. He just doesn't like the idea of it. And that's what prompted him to really advocate for that to be an option in North Carolina. And maybe in the questions, we could talk more about composting if you're interested in that, because that is sort of like an up and coming thing that is available in some places. And there's 2 companies, Return Home, and then Katrina's, and then the one on your resource list that you could actually, so you could do that now. You could get your body shipped to a state where it's legal and do human composting. But I don't know, going on an airplane kind of seems counterintuitive to the whole green part of it, but you know, really just like no judgment of like what your dream is, you know, if that's part of your dream, you can do it. I mean, you can do like with some planning ahead, you know, you can certainly do it. Lee, I know you asked me to talk about like some industry terminology that you can use if you are using a funeral home. So one of the most important things is that any funeral home is going to understand is that you call, if you want the funeral home to come later or the crematory to come a little bit later, you know, like a day later or whatever time frame to bring your loved one into their care, then you just call that a delayed pickup. And that's like an industry term. You know, they might ask you some questions about just sort of making sure that the person's in a controlled environment, especially if it's like the middle of summer. But that's really all you need for a vigil, is just like that you're protecting the person from the elements, you know. Of course, having a home vigil, you know, it depends on what kind of house you have and what kind of crowd you're talking about. And if you're comfortable having like a whole bunch of people in your house. And that's one thing that the National Home Funeral Alliance is really trying to like work on their languaging, because it has traditionally been sort of like a kind of an elitist thing that it's like, oh, if you have a nice house that, you know, the kind of house that you like have a party in, you know, that you could accommodate people. That's making a lot of assumptions about your life and it's sort of classist. I mean, some of the language is kind of classist. So, I mean, good on them that they're trying to have those. I mean, it's been some painful conversations, but they are really, I mean, I think that as a group, they're really trying to work on languaging to make that the education about having a home vigil time more accessible. So I just wanted to say that you can, you know, any questions, you can certainly call me, ask me any questions. I always offer that. People pretty rarely call me, but sometimes they do, you know, and but you know, if you're doing something like outside of your comfort zone, I'm sure some of the best things that you've ever done in your life were outside of your comfort zone, but you know, you just need like some support or some information to know that's a thing that you can do. Personally, I'm a green burial fan. I love hearing about the human composting. I mean, in some way that makes even more sense to me than green burial, because then you would really be able to like use the land a different way. So I love learning about that. And then, and I am a fan of the vigil time, you know, in whatever way that you can do that, because it's really like you're giving yourself the time and space to be sad, you know, and to be moved. And I have gone to some home funerals that it was more like a cocktail party with a body in the other room. And that was just like, that was kind of disappointing, you know, because it was like, oh, people were just kind of like on autopilot doing their thing, like they were at a party, but then they went and put their flower, you know, with the person. And then we went to the cemetery later, but it was like, I just felt like it was a missed opportunity for like that reverence. And so when I've talked to, you know, like my mom about what she wants her home vigil to be like, then she wants it to be quiet. So, you know, setting the tone, you can turn lights down and play soft music. And then, you know, if you whisper talk to people, then they'll whisper talk. And that to me is like the sacred time, you know, because then you're giving yourself the opportunity to just like let the magic come to you and like really sink in a different way that just like very deeply contemplate like what we're doing in life and on this earth. And when Lee and I talked before, I said it's like a crack in the cosmic egg, that's people react a lot of different ways. And it's just always going to be, when someone you love passes, it's going to put you in some direction, and it's either going to be like opening you up or shutting you down. So having that contemplative time, then that's just like increasing your chances that it's going to be a beautiful experience and help open up possibilities in your life. And by sharing that, by inviting other people to vigil time, then you're sharing that opportunity with them and showing them like what it can be like to die peacefully at home, rather than like fighting in an ICU, which, I mean, that's a completely appropriate way every way that people die is fine. I mean, it's like, it is what it is, but but we're like modeling behavior to each other by living, right? And so then people that die a certain way, then we learn like, oh, that maybe that's what it'll be like for me, and then on another level, this is a time to, we can think about, like, do you believe that something is happening to that person's spirit? Do we need to not disturb them? Can they hear us when we're like saying sweet things to them or anointing them? Is that helping them? Like, is that helping their soul? Lots of, I don't know, but I mean, it's like, it helps my soul when people are sweet to me and say nice things to me, And for my own vigil time, I've talked to some of my friends that, like I have this friend that we meet every other week, and we go on a walk, and then we sit by the river and we listen to this meditation called Isha Kriya. And it's like 14 minutes long. So it would make sense to me that at my vigil, then my friend Brooke would come and do the Isha Kriya, because that's something that I do in my life. And then I have another group that every other week I go to when we say a rosary. And so that group, when we die, we'll go and we'll say the rosary, pray a rosary for each other. And we do always add in a time to remember people that have passed. So I really find that a beautiful thing to think about for vigil time, that vigil time would be bringing in all these like special things that I do in my life, or my husband, like playing guitar at home. Then at my vigil, he would play the guitar, because that's something that he does almost every day and I listen to. So, you can almost like use the thinking about your vigil time as what's important in your life and how you would create opportunities to have those special moments in your life. But just like condensed down in vigil time. So those are some of my thoughts. And but I would love for anyone who has any questions, then to sort of like steer the conversation, instead of just me like going on and on about like human composting in Washington State or something, because I don't know if you're interested in that, but I'm interested in what you're interested in.
All right, so who has questions for Meredith? Phyllis.
So if we wanted, so let's say the person who's died wants to donate organs, but then we also want to have a home, a home death where we wash and wrap the body. How would that work, or would it work?
Okay, so actual organ donation, there's three different kinds of donation. There's whole body donation, which generally with whole body, then the body has to go. There's different time frames, and some of them are very short time frames, like that there's supposed to be there within 4 hours of death, but it's a shorter time frame. So you could definitely have, you could do like a ritual washing and have a very short service, very short vigil time, and then someone do a whole body donation. And then there's organ donation and there's tissue donation. And so tissue donation, most people are going to be a candidate for that. And if you pass in a facility that receives Medicaid funding, which like what hospital doesn't receive Medicaid funding, then that body has to be evaluated for organ donation. So it would be unlikely that, like a home hospice death, and they would be like transported, donate organs, and then go back. You see what I'm saying? But if you're in a hospital, that's more likely to happen. So, and actual organ donation is usually when people have been declared brain dead to actually use organs, so that doesn't happen. I mean, that's like sort of a special circumstance. But then tissue donation, they could take, you can be like a skin donor or a long bone donor. And so that is, they do tend to be like more careful about that. You would just see, in that case, you could have, like if you had a funeral home helping you with transportation, then they could take the person into their care from the hospital, bathe them, kind of evaluate the situation, and then maybe have them dressed already. Or sometimes we use this suit that's called a Unionol, which is basically like a big plastic onesie for if the body's in a condition that they need that, for like, leakage or something. So you could have somebody help you with that aspect, and then have a home vigil if you wanted to, or have vigil time at the funeral home.
Meredith, I think what I'm hearing is that it's complicated but possible.
Yeah.
These different situations,
Yeah.
potentially not necessarily mutually exclusive, but it's complicated. And that in the case where one wants to do some elements at home and potentially honor this donation piece, it might actually be helpful to get someone like you or a funeral home involved to help with the transport and the care of the body. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes. And that's the same thing with, in the case of an autopsy, which is, going to be way more invasive than, it depends on what kind of donation it is. But some of those procedures can be pretty invasive, and it would just be, that would be difficult to manage without the, like the chemicals that we have in the prep room, and sort of like the specialized, things like the plastics and things like that.
Usually when people ask me that question, I say it's more or less mutually exclusive. You're either going to keep the body at home and do the 72 hours and do the home care and home funeral and home burial, or you're going to do organ donation. But I'm really hearing you say there's a lot of gray area. It's probably better to work with a professional.
You can make it work. Yeah, you can make it work.
Got it.
But it would be, I wouldn't recommend it to like go the do it yourself route that way, because it can be a lot. The thing that I would say that I was, I wouldn't say in front of my coworkers, is that if you were, I would recommend, like never surrendering possession of the body. If this is what you want to do, if you want to vigil, then just have them go straight to your house, or have them at your house, like a lot of back and forth and stuff. And then, cause then you're getting into days and things like that. And part of the magic of the home funeral is that, when someone when someone dies, then if you're seeing this gradual process of what is happening with their body, and you're never, it's way different if someone like comes to the funeral home and then you come see them a couple of days later. Like you've missed the whole transition time. And in the way that we're talking about it is, and the way that like Jewish people talk about what's happening with the person's spirit in that time, then it's really like the continuity does matter. And I don't pretend to know anything about anything of like what what like an actual dead person's experience is like, but it makes sense to me that, from like the moment of death, then that immediate time is like, that's really important.
Yeah, I hear
Yeah.
you saying that there's really important things happening in those early moments, and up to the 72 hours, and that if the goal is to be present for that process, then
Mhm.
try and keep the body with you as much as
Yeah.
possible, because that's a tender, vulnerable time for everybody involved.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And what people have become used to is someone dies and then they go a couple of days later to a funeral home and see them like all dressed up in their casket, probably embalmed, and then they look totally different than they did when they were in the hospital bed or when they were dying, and then sometimes that can be shocking. Sometimes it can be comforting to people that the person like looks better or looks more like they could just pop up and like go about their day. And then sometimes that's kind of traumatizing for people because it's like, oh wait, I saw them the decline, and then it seems unnatural that then it's like they look like they're just sleeping, so it can be good or bad. It's just what you want, but then to expect that you're going to go and see, like, for example, an unembalmed person several days later, and that they're going to look like somebody who's like all dressed up and embalmed in their casket, that may or may not happen, because sometimes there could be like discoloration that, so it's like, if you're there through the whole process, then you're seeing the process, and then like your expectations are just the reality of what's happening. But then if you're like away from the person for a long period, like days or something, and then you think what they're going to look like, then you've missed the whole transition process, and it might be not what you were after.
What we do is we do the 72 hours with the ice, and we have them on the altar, and their face, if there hasn't been an accident, their face and their hands are accessible. And then once the funeral is happening, we cover everything so that folks who don't want to come to the vigil and see the body are coming to the funeral and they're shrouded. So there's a couple of different options there. I see Chris, I see your hand. Go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, just clarify a little about the organ donation. Like, I usually have thought that that's something that happens, like if someone is in an auto accident, or, not after the end of a long, from if they're quite old, or if they're at the end of a sickness. And you said that usually it's someone who's brain dead. So are you saying it's usually done from someone who's like just very freshly died, or maybe even not?
Yeah, or that they were in some kind of accident and they didn't die immediately.
So would they?
And they're already like at the hospital, and then that's where the organ harvesting is going to take place.
Yeah. So it does seem as if organ donation is not probably something that would even normally happen with someone who died at home.
Yeah, I can't think of a time. I can think of times that we've done like the whole body donation, and we just had to like coordinate that quickly, or the person or the body needs to be under refrigeration, like as quickly as possible. But yeah, for like the real, like the organs to really be viable, that is more like of a brain death accident kind of situation. And then,
Right.
you know, they can like kind of prepare the family, and then the family could be present for, you know, when the machines are turned off and everything.
Great. Thank you. Susan.
Yes, Meredith, question, how far from the house can a body be buried if it's on your own land? Whether
So,
it's a body or ashes.
right. So, scattering cremated remains or having them like not in an urn, you can do kind of whatever you want realistically.
Okay.
You can't just like make a big spectacle of it in a crowd of people, you know, or somebody might get mad and they might,
Okay.
you know, call the cops or something. But burying an urn, then you just have to know if you're marking that or not, because if you're, because you wouldn't want somebody to dig up an urn, you know, like 50 years from now and just be like all wigged out, like something's gone wrong, you know?
Yeah.
And then for burying a body, then if you're in the county, I mean, generally like in the city limits, you can't do it because there's going to be some rules against it in city limits. But in the county, it just has to be like a certain, depending on the county, a certain number of feet from a water source. So like, you
A
know,
well. or
well,
something.
yeah.
Okay.
And then some places it's like a certain number of feet from your property line. And then you are supposed to file it on your deed so that again, 50 years from now, if it's not marked, then nobody's like digging in their garden and then find a skull and they're like, oh, the murder, you know? So you just have to plan ahead. So like what is that land going to be used for in the future? So, you know, when families have family land and their family cemetery, then it's like everybody knows that's what you're doing. So there's just sort of like some, you know, just being open about it and filing it on your deed. You know, I mean, that could impact being able to sell the land in the future if somebody's like, yeah, no, I don't want to.
Okay. And that's outside of scattering, you're saying. If you're just going to be scattered on your property.
Yeah, because
that's
like
not
who's
big.
going to know? I mean,
Who's going to know? Okay.
yeah. But
And,
when I got on, someone was talking about at Carolina Memorial Sanctuary how they mix the cremated remains with you know, basically like really acidic compost to remediate it, and then so to incorporate it into the soil so it is bioavailable. Because if you just like dump cremated remains on a plant, it's probably going to kill the plant because it's like super alkaline.
Okay.
But yeah, like who's gonna, it just depends on how you do it, you know, who's gonna know.
Thank you.
Right. Well, we have just time for maybe one last question. Anyone else? Do you want to tell us a little bit about the ice pack since you're the ice pack queen?
Well, I mean, a lot of it is just, you know, common sense about if it's, you know, if it's wintertime and you're in a place that, you know, you can keep a room really cool. I mean, our cooler at work is like 40 degrees. So, I mean, it'd be hard to get your house to like 40 degrees ambient temperature, but, you know, that's going to make a big difference. Whereas if it's the summertime and, you know, you could just like turn your, you know, just keep it as cool as possible in the room and then not like blaring direct sunlight. So, you know, just like a cool, dark environment. And then the most important, I mean, you can use like a lot of ice at the beginning to sort of initially cool the body down because, I mean, you know, think about like the food that we eat. How does it get digested? A lot of it is because it's getting digested, like broken down by bacteria in our gut. And so then when you die, then what's the food for the bacteria? You know, it's like your tissue. So cooling down, especially around the abdomen. And then, you know, I have heard some home funeral people that talk about, you know, if there's like, you know, fluids or they're worried, they just sort of like, I mean, you can kind of halfway freeze somebody, you know, and then you're not going to have like, you're not going to have any problems, but I think that it's nice to use the ice packs rather than dry ice, because it's just, you're not going to like burn your own skin with ice packs, because dry ice can be kind of hard to handle. You need to have gloves and a hammer to break it. So either thing is going to be, you have to have it available ahead of time. But mostly like torso, and then depending on how big somebody is, it's just like on some people, you might not need to put it on their legs, but if somebody is really big, you need to cool them down. And so I've always just done it, mostly torso, but then also on the behind the head, just to like cool somebody down initially, really well. And then you would be able to change the ice packs less frequently, because they would, not get warmed up as fast.
Yeah, I mean, that's in some ways the benefit of if somebody dies, goes to the morgue, gets put in cold storage in the morgue, and then comes home, they're already pretty cold. Like that's not that you'd want to create that, but if that happens, that's in some ways an advantage.
Right, right.
Yeah,
because then you would just like need to maintain the environment or maintain, it would be more of a maintenance thing.
Right.
And so it is good to have friends that have ice too, because then you can like kind of switch it out. And I've tried to give ice packs away to people a lot, and they're like, I don't have room in my freezer for that, because it does take up room. But if you have sort of like a collective of people that have ice packs, and then you can rotate
And
when to switch them.
Are you talking about the ice packs that come in a package with something to keep cool, like that they're just in the plastic, the frozen ice packs like that?
What I've gotten is called Techni Ice, and it comes in a flat sheet, and then you put it in your bathtub, submerge it in water, and kind of like crinkle it up, and it soaks the water in, and then you freeze it. And then you can put like wax paper in between the sheets so they don't stick together. But then it takes a couple of days to like freeze really solid. I mean, you could use any kind of ice packs, but Techni Ice is what they use, like for deep sea fishermen. It's sort of like in these little packets, so you can cut it to different sizes.
What is it called again? Wait, I'm sorry, the name of it again?
There's different brands. One is called Techni Ice, like TECH-NI, Techni Ice. And then there's like, I don't know, I bought some other brand on Amazon. It had a penguin on it, and it was like called Mr. Freeze or something.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
But then it's good to put that like in a Ziploc bag, because it does sweat out.
Okay. Right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that that is it for our time. Meredith, so much gratitude for you. Thank you so much. Such a gift that you're offering.
You're so welcome. And feel free to share my contact information, my cell phone or my email. And I'm really glad to talk to you about any of your questions or concerns.
Oh, that's very sweet. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Blessings, my dear. Let's take a little 5-minute break and come right back, and we'll pick up from here in our little last push. How's everyone doing? Anyone want to check in? Marianne, Lori, anybody want to check in? Marissa, we haven't heard from you today. Pam. Giving you all quiet ones a minute, a chance to chime in. How's all that death talk sitting with everyone? Good enough?
Just wow. That's what I'm coming up with. Wow.
Wow.
It's good. Wow.
Good. Good. All right. Anybody get some inspiration from all this conversation? Meredith's a love. I'm so glad you got a chance to meet her. Oh, and I was supposed to give you her contact information. Let me put that in the chat. That's very sweet of her to offer.
That death and that home funeral and death care midwife training, it looks like the last time they showed it was in 2020.
I know, you know, Caroline's so busy with the Memorial Sanctuary. Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm going to be meeting with her, so she's the right person to ask then. Okay.
Ask her, yeah. Ask her if she's doing it. You know, it would be nice. I would actually like to know if you get an answer.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
There's someone in California on the West Coast. Does anybody know? Her name is Jerry. She does a bunch of home funeral stuff. Oh, what is her last name? Yeah, I'll make myself a note and find out, and I can put that in the link too. Make myself a note. Yeah, okay, so some last paperwork stuff. Let me do a little screen share here. Get back to these forms. So I'm going to talk about some documents. These documents are on my website. I'm going to talk about this form called the Declaration Regarding Disposition of the Physical Body, quickly about the death certificate, and then there's potentially others. If you have a process that you paid for, like the compost or the suit or the pod or any of these alkalinizing cremation, like make sure you put receipts with your death paperwork, right? Or let your people know, because you could have paid $6,000 for this thing or whatever, and then nobody finds it until you're, you know, buried in a traditional way or something. So make sure if you do something like that, you add it to your paperwork. The declaration regarding disposition of physical body. I think this is a really good one that we should take the time to just read through a little bit. Does anybody have this printed out and they're willing to do some reading? Let me know if you have it. I have it in front of me so I can read, but certainly it's nice to hear from other people. Jess.
How much of it would you like me to read?
Why don't you read up through the one that says third? Read that whole top section.
Okay. Declaration regarding disposition of physical body after death. I, after thoughtful deliberation, being of sound mind and more than 21 years of age, in exercise of my paramount right to direct the manner of disposal of my physical body after my death, and in order to state clearly my direction, do willfully and voluntarily make this declaration and do hereby declare: first, autopsy is a violation of my spiritual convictions and religious beliefs, and therefore no autopsy shall be performed upon my physical body under any circumstances. Second, after death has taken place, my physical body shall not be embalmed or in any way artificially preserved, except by means of refrigeration, air conditioning, ice, or dry ice. Third, for the period of 72 hours after death has taken place, I request that, insert name and phone number, take custody of my body acting as my death care agent, and exercise their right to care for and dispose of my body. If they are not available for this, then I request that friends or my religious group be allowed to care for and dispose of my body. If this is not possible because of the laws of my state, I request that my family, friends, and acquaintances have access to the presence of my physical body in order to take part in prayer, read spiritual literature, and perform any practices associated with care of the body after death. I request that these activities and my funeral arrangements be supported by, and then there's space to fill in.
Right. Let me give you some more context for this form. This form was created by the Center of End of Life Transitions, my mentors, Caroline Young and Ruth Ostrenga, and you can use this as it is, or you can change it. It's a similar thing. It's a place to start. It's a template. It's a alternative to somehow how things are handled in the world. And so, there's strong language here, which you may not agree with. You might be fine with autopsy, you might be fine with embalming, but the point here is that this is a strongly worded, notarized document that allows us to do what we want to do with our bodies. And it's giving us all permission to create that, right? So again, use this if you will, and change it if you will. Okay, who would like to read the next few? Let's see. Chris.
Yeah. Fourth, I request that my family, friends, and religious group make the following funeral service arrangements. Fifth, no fewer than 72 hours after my death, my physical body shall be buried or cremated. My remains shall be disposed of as follows. Places to circle those. Sixth, the directions herein expressed are based upon my deeply held philosophical conviction, religious belief, and spiritual practice. I hereby request blank to guide and support my family and friends as necessary in the fulfillment of these directions. Want me to keep reading?
This is good. I think we can stop here. The seventh one is basically like, this is really important to me, basically. And then the back is, the witness, the signature area, the witnesses, and the notary. And, my teachers are Buddhists, right? And so this is a very sort of fringe or alternative or minor religion. And so they feel really strongly about this, but it's sort of not commonplace or not mainstream. And so the reason that they've created this document is because this is an important part of their spiritual practice. And for those of us who are doing conscious dying work, it is an important part of our spiritual practice, and the death ritual is important to us. And so that's why this document has been created. Now, hopefully people's family and friends are on board and there's not a struggle. But there, historically has been incidents of people struggling with not wanting to honor a cremation request or not wanting to honor different things because it's unfamiliar. So this is just a form that you have access to. The death certificate is the next. Well, let me just stop there. Any questions about this form? Any thoughts, any questions, any comments about this form? Okay, Teresa, and then Chris.
I have no questions.
Okay.
Am I supposed to read something?
No, you had your hand, you had your virtual hand.
Oh, I did. Oh, that was an accident. Sorry.
Okay, no problem. Chris.
Okay, well, as usual, I have a question about the autopsy. Aren't there circumstances where an autopsy needs to be done, like by law?
I would imagine that that's true if there's foul play suspected. Yes, I think that there's extenuating circumstances where that's true, where you can't get around it. So again, it's one of those things where you set out your ideal and you get what you get. And I don't know, maybe one of us will be embroiled in some kind of murder mystery, but probably somewhat rare.
Okay.
Yeah. Other
Yeah.
thoughts or questions about the, take it, make it your own, but just this gives you permission to get creative about what you want for your life and what you want for death and what you want for your body. And I'm really grateful for them for creating that form. The death certificate is a super quick one. This is what a death certificate looks like. It starts out as a regular 8.5 white piece of paper that the hospice person will give you to fill out, and then you take it to the county. They shrink it down and they put it on this fancy green paper with a seal on it, and then you pay like $15 for this copy. That's what a death certificate is. And I realized when I was caring for some folks who were dying that I didn't know some crucial information like the name of their mother or the name of their father or their social security number. And so what I've done is I've just taken the death certificate and I filled it out with my information ahead of time. Obviously not the date of my death or the cause of my death, but some information that other people might not know when the time comes. And I just keep it with my documents so that it's just easy on my people when they're processing that. So that's super easy. It's a state by state form. I have a link on the site for that. It's not that big of a deal if you don't get to it. Usually someone has access to your files. They can find that information. Yeah, so that wraps up our after death. Of course, if you want to be an organ donor, make sure you get those forms. If you have specifics about final arrangements, any kind of information you can leave your loved ones is going to be helpful. So take a breath with me. Joan Baez says, you don't get to choose how you're going to die or when. You can only decide how you're going to live now. All right, so the last section is the financial, and then we're going to do a little bit about building death literate community, and maybe we'll have a chance to do another breakout room, or we might just stay together and do a little processing. This is a very packed day. So what I want to say to you about the financial overview is that I am neither an accountant nor am I a lawyer. My accountant charges, I don't know, $200 an hour. And whenever I've used a lawyer, it's been $400 or more an hour. And generally people pay roughly on average about $10 an hour for this workshop. So you're getting $10 an hour advice right now. Take it for what it is. $10 an hour friendly information. But I wanted to give a little bit of a financial heads up and big picture. My advice to you is to go seek out someone that can actually help you with the financial stuff, because it's big and it's thick and it's complicated and it's important. It's important stuff. So this is a very, very quick and dirty financial overview. And I just have these into these little sections. Super easy thing to do is to make sure that your beneficiary information is what you want it to be. So there's this beneficiary, this term beneficiary, this term TOD and POD. They sort of all mean the same thing. The person that's going to inherit the stuff that you own, right? So beneficiary technically applies to your IRAs, your life insurance, annuities, your retirement plans. Transfer on death often returns is like a non-retirement investment account. And then POD is your cash, your money market, your checking, your savings account. But basically the umbrella term is beneficiary. You don't know how many horror stories I have heard and seen and witnessed of somebody being a beneficiary on something that was like an ex-husband or an ex-wife. Like, you just don't want that. That is just going to be bad feelings for a lot of people involved. And it's really easy to call your bank and say, who's my beneficiary? And the truth is you can open up bank accounts. I bank with a local bank, and I you know, I don't know, I've had 5 accounts with them. And I went in and I said, who do I have as my beneficiary? And they say, we don't ask that question when you open an account. It's like nobody. So if you've opened checking and savings accounts, likely your beneficiary is not on there. It's not, there's no one. So it's easy enough to track your annuities, track your life insurance plans, and just, you know, take a half a day or take a couple of weeks and do a day here and a day there, and like make sure to call them and find out who your beneficiaries are and update your paperwork. So generally how it works is that if you have a beneficiary listed, you don't need to go through probate. The beneficiary just says, hey, my person died, I'm the beneficiary, and the account will get transferred in their name. So no need to go through legal probate, no need to go through the county, no need to go through any of that. So that's really nice when that happens smoothly and easily and people don't have to jump through hoops. All right, that's your $10 financial advice. The will and the trust, anything else you own, a car, a home, property, everything else needs to be done in some kind of will, right? If it's in a will, it needs to be probated. If it's a trust, it doesn't go through probate, but trusts are way more complicated and ironclad and super tight. You definitely need an attorney for those. I have done my own little DIY will. I wouldn't recommend it because it may not work. But there's a couple of resources I have on my website that are, you know, like organizations are more and more getting savvy and creative where, you know, we can sort of do stuff ourselves. But I actually have it on my list to make sure I get my will checked out by that lawyer that I recommended. So there's the Osher Lifelong Learning, which I mentioned last time. I did hear that they had an estate planning class, and I think I looked at it and didn't see it, but I want to take it too. I want to learn more about this. So any questions on the financial, quick and dirty, big picture?
What is probate? What does that mean?
Probate is a legal process run by your county that looks over the will and makes sure everything is in order and doesn't release assets until it goes through that process. It's like a safeguard. Yep. Okay, one more big financial thing is something called the durable power of attorney or a financial power of attorney. This is applicable to when you're still alive. So say your healthcare age, say you're not able to make your own decisions for whatever reason, your healthcare agent steps up and suddenly they don't have access to your money and they need to pay for a facility that you're in and they don't have access and there's no way to get access to your money because your spouse isn't living or you don't have children or whatever it is. A durable or financial power of attorney is a person that has access to your accounts should something happen to you and you can't make decisions. So this is an important piece to have a durable power of attorney. I have a form, again, related to North Carolina, but you can find it in your own state. This is just gives you a breadcrumb trail to look for. There it is. It's a durable power of attorney. And it seems to me like it's equally as important as a healthcare power of attorney. It does not have to be the same person. In fact, maybe it's easier if it's not. Let the healthcare power of attorney be dealing with the hospital, dealing with these questions, right? So say you hire Karen Sanders, she's your patient advocate, she is your healthcare agent, and she's not going to be having access to your bank accounts. That wouldn't be appropriate. But someone in your life would be your durable or financial power of attorney that have access to your bank accounts that would make sure Karen gets paid. Does that make sense? Okay. Great. All right, any questions, any more questions on financial stuff? Let me stop so I can see you all. Put it on your checklist to reach out about the beneficiary stuff. That's super easy. You can do all of that yourself. And then make sure you put on your list to see a lawyer, an accountant, something if you have assets and you want to make sure that that's going in the right direction. If you have, if you have enough complicated assets, you might want to look into a trust. It's more expensive on the planning end, but it's ironclad. It's really easy for the people you leave behind. Annie, you're muted, love.
Thank you. So if one dies and you don't have these things assigned, my understanding from just going through it with my siblings, a sister died, then it's really whatever's left. If there isn't a will, it goes to the siblings. Well, I guess maybe siblings. Okay. And then if siblings are gone, does it next go to nieces and nephews automatically? Do you know that? Do you
Yeah,
know?
I mean, I have not gone through a probate process like that, but it's something like that, right? It's the spouse, and then it's the children, and then it's the, next of kin, parents or siblings, or right. It just goes on from there. So, and then people sometimes have claims, like they'll come to probate and be like, I'm this person's friend or something. And then the court would hear that process. They would sit with that process.
Right.
Yeah.
What happened with my sister is for the first 2 weeks after she died, we had no idea if she wanted to be cremated. We couldn't find anything. It was very sudden. She died in her sleep. And so we kept asking, what would Diane want? What would Diane want? And it was kind of assumed that we 3 siblings remaining would figure that out. Then we did find in her journals between her quilt.
Uh-oh, you're a little frozen.
How about now?
Yeah, you're back.
Okay. Anyway, the question is, it was never a legal will, but it was in her journal and she signed it, and we just used it as if this is the truth. And we just went forward with her wishes, and where she hadn't completed it, we worked together to figure it out.
Yeah.
Is that normal, or is that, I don't know. I would hope that'd be okay for anybody, but I don't know if there's like the state can interfere and say, well, this is not a legal document. So
yeah, I mean, I have heard it said that back of the napkin, deathbed wills that someone signs are admissible. They're legitimate. They even can override a previous will. But all of that would be determined in a court process, right? That's overseen by a judge who's then, and then of course, I mean, I've just seen nightmares of situations, people suing, and, so one of the ways that death can be a gift is if we clean all that stuff up, and clean it up, not only in the paperwork, but clean it up with our living relatives, and hopefully that running around and doing, probating things and trying to find account passwords and trying to figure out beneficiaries and freaking out because this went to the ex-spouse, like that's no fun for anybody. Like it sets a whole bummer experience over the person's death, as opposed to a grieving or a celebrating experience. It's yuck. It's yuck for all of us that have to deal with that.
Yep. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Audrey, did you have thoughts about that?
Yeah, I was just going to add, I'm my next step when I get ready to do something big with my mother's case is that my mother died last year, and her will was done. My mother had dementia, and the lawyer that she went to, I think, also had dementia, but the will that she had was not valid. And also the will that she had said that she was of sound mind, and she was not of sound mind. And my nephew, who she said she left that in the will said everything was left to, it's not a valid will. And so we're going to go to probate on that. But it's a case where her assets are in a trust. So this is a case where it's going to go to probate, and it's going to be tied up for a while. And I think when someone deliberately knows that what they're doing is not legit, I mean, and he knows it's not legit because he knows she had dementia. When he goes in front of the judge, he will have to say, he will have to tell the truth. But I think when people have undue influence, he used to live with my mother. And so he used to hear her tell, my mother used to call him my father's name all the time and get people confused. So he knew that she had dementia for the last 8 years. So
Yeah, that's a messy situation in my understanding of trusts. And, this is beyond my $10 an hour.
oh yeah, this is
financial.
I mean, I'm gonna have to sell the house just to go to probate.
Yeah, I mean, trusts are pretty ironclad. And anyway, that sounds like a sticky wicket. So I'm sorry to hear that. And yeah, that's going to be a long journey. So if you want to save your loved ones, the long journey and the heartache and the headache of all that, get your financial stuff in order. Because people will fight over it. And it's somewhat about money, but it's more about love and recognition and care and acknowledgement and all that beautiful stuff. So if you can, clean that up.
And it's kind of the logical recognition of who gets what. And so when you go, like you give, the children, then the grandchildren, and then but you don't usually skip over the generation of the children and just jump to the nephew. It's just.
Yeah, except if there's, bad blood and, this is where all the family, trauma can come up. So if there's any way that you can mitigate that and be clean with that in your own paperwork, I would strongly advise you do that and leave less for the next generation to deal with.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
All right. I would like to move on. Phyllis, can you hold your question and we'll come back? Okay, great. I want to just do this last section and then we'll have some time to share, which is how do we build death literate community? And this is a big passion of mine. And if we had more time, I'd love to talk about it more. But there's lots of suggestions here and you might have other suggestions, but one of my suggestions is host a conversation with your faith community. Bring someone like me or Meredith or Karen in to have a conversation at your church or, with your book club or with your group of friends, or do a book club on a death related book. So, encourage your family or friends to take a class like this so you have shared reality. Doing the death and dessert party, having a death focused conversation, doing a buddy support system in your life, like either with this buddy or you could create a friendship buddy with someone in your life and say, hey, can we hold each other accountable and be a support team for getting through this? It can be more than just the buddy here. You can do that with multiple people. Death Cafe is a fabulous group. Sometimes there's salons. You could host a salon, wine and cheese, and talk about death. Doesn't have to be chocolate. So any of these ideas, rituals, if you know of a Day of the Dead ritual that happens right around Halloween, November 1st or 2nd, go to it and get to know the people who are doing Day of the Dead rituals in your community, because that's a celebration of death and the ancestors and the beloved dead. And it's a great way to step into that world. Here's a picture of an altar at my community, Day of the Dead. We bring all of our ancestor photos out. We have a big meal and we talk about our dead. We tell stories about their lives, about their deaths, about how they impacted us. So it's a very, very cool ritual, and a lot of it's happening, around more and more these days. a few last things and then I'll stop sharing. We can talk. So C.S. Lewis said, there are far, far better things ahead than any we leave behind. This is a great way to move forward. Let's see, I have just a quick reminder that I'm doing this class again in September 10th and 17th. So you can pass that on to friends, and I don't do a whole lot of marketing. So when you pass it on, it's really helpful for me. And I'm doing a class in November called Walking Towards a Good Death, an invitation for internal preparation with my dear friend, Mary Lane. And we did that recently, February, March, and it was awesome. I used to have a Patreon account, but I couldn't maintain another social media thing. And if you found that this workshop was more valuable than you paid for, you are welcome to donate to me at this email address. I do a sliding scale fee structure, which is sometimes confusing for people, but it's really important to me to do it because I want people to be able to access it all along. And again, no questions asked. And I support myself pretty much 100% by doing grassroots education these days. So for those of you who paid higher on the sliding scale, I'm very, very grateful. It helps float me. And I've done this kind of work my whole life. I was a farmer for many years. I ran a nonprofit. So I'm used to existing in the lower income ranges, and I depend on and my community to survive and support me. So that's that. And then the last thing I want to ask for is for you to fill out the evaluation so I can continue to make this class better. I can post this in the chat right now. I'm also going to put it in the final email to you with the link to the recording. But it helps me have testimonials and get ideas and also continue to make the class better. So I'm going to stop sharing there, and we have about 20 minutes. Do you all want to go into breakout rooms to have some time to process, or would you rather stay in the large group? Let's see. If you'd rather stay in the large group, I don't know what hand gesture to give you. If you'd rather stay in the large group, give me a thumbs up now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Wow, most of you. Okay, we're going to stay here. So yeah, that's a lot today. You know, I've often thought about doing this over the course of 3-4 hours because we could have used twice the day, but then I'm always reluctant because I fear that people don't want to make that big of a commitment. Do you all have thoughts about that? If we turned this into a 3-part series, would that be daunting or overwhelming, or would you welcome that? Christine and Annie. Christine.
No, I was just thinking that, Lee, when this last week, that gee, if we had more time to integrate, because I'm overwhelmed right now. And I'm sure you've heard that many times before. And I just have also become I really have affection for this group, and I would love to know you better. So 3 would be great for me. I mean, because I'm older and retired, so that might be a different.
Right. And if it was a longer time frame, like, oh, you had to commit to 12 hours and it was slightly more money, that wouldn't deter you personally.
Not me, but my age and stage,
Right. So Jess said it was perfect for her. So it's like, yeah, I'm hearing the voices. Annie, do you have thoughts about that?
Yeah, I also would like it to be longer. I would pay more. I was even thinking 4 sessions. And it's certainly information is really helpful, but it's this information could very well just sit in Word documents and my files that I've got all set up with these documents. It could just sit for another year. Whereas if there's accountability that we each commit to in between and with our buddies, there's something about that works for me, and I'm going to try to set that up even though we only met 2 times. But I think my sense is I would move forward more faster and more effectively if it was longer.
Yeah, so I'm hearing, and then a couple more people are like, hey, this was good. I'm hearing that there's more being present in the process and being supported in the process if we're going to continue to meet. That's sort of missing as we're ending the second. Yeah, I hear that. I think just the concern on the other end is people are overwhelmed. They're already sort of zoomed out and they're like, 12 hours on Zoom, like, maybe I'd rather die instead. That was my attempt at a death joke. Great. Okay. If any of you have other thoughts, you put any evaluation or send me a chat. But let's take the rest of this time to just check out how you doing. How is this landing? I'm hearing some overwhelm. I'm hearing some people are integrating fine. And what's alive for folks now? Marianne, I know you didn't share today. Do you want to share?
Yeah, I was just writing in the chat box. I'm happy to share. I am both overwhelmed with how much thought and action all of this will take, but I'm thrilled to have this. I have just recently, back a few weeks ago, we had that big snowstorm and a power outage. And that afternoon with no power, I read Mallory McDuff's new book called Our Last Best Act. And, all end of life stuff. So it was a wonderful sort of priming the pump for this. And I do recommend the book. And she's also doing some interviews, and it's a good bit. A good bit of it is more detailed than this, but it does have a more narrow focus as well. This has triggered for me a goal that has been mine for the last few years since I sold my home in Atlanta. And I sold my home in large part to make it simpler for my only grown son when I die, so that he did not have to deal with the disposition of the house, the garage, the basement, the everything. And I felt wonderful about doing that. However, and of course I pared down. So not only do I need to think about all of the things we've covered in the workshop, but I need to pick up my goal to continue to make decisions and disposition of my physical possessions, all in the spirit of wanting things to be in good order. I think I would like, in a perfect world for me, which of course it's not, I would like 2-hour sessions spread out over, say, maybe once a month, with the intention of completing the work and having accountability built in, just as structure for me. Yes.
I'm hearing beautiful thoughts from you around both overwhelmed and grateful to have the info and other resources coming in and making decisions to make it easier on your son. And the structure being, I sort of more hand-holding along the way. So thank you.
Just as a vehicle, to get me to do it, to hold myself accountable.
Right. Another resource I have around that is, death doulas are ready to help people and are eager to work. And I don't think the demand has caught up with the supply of death doulas. So you could always hire someone like me or a death doula, at a whatever rate. I don't know what people's rates are, but to help with this, right? There are people you can pay to help with the accountability process. Like, my goal is to get this done by this date, and I want to check in with you once a week to review what I've done and what I need to do. And here's my checklist, and I want you to hold my hands, right? Like use the death doulas that are emerging from these death doula schools to help to, you know, like they're getting the practice and experience. You're getting to work with someone. Maybe this is someone you actually want to use as a death doula that you can pay, you know, that is using that as their source of income. So I think those are great ways to go forward. It's sort of like a fitness coach, right? We hire trainers. So this is someone that can hold our hand, and you find a death doula in your area. What a great way to make a connection.
Thank
Thank you, Marianne. Yeah. Anybody else? Who else wants to share today? Pam, did you want to share? I see you, Teresa. Let's give Pam a chance.
Well, I don't know, as we've gone through all of this, I'm viewing it more in terms of my sister who has stage 4 cancer. And I'm saying, well, I think we've covered this and maybe this, and this is all these other things that we need to do for her. So as much as I think we've done for her, I know we have more work to do. And I am that durable power of attorney and medical person for her as well. But, you know, at the same time, I know I should really start working on this stuff for me. And the priority would be the medical, the patient advocate part of it. I think that's the one that I would prioritize first.
Right. Yeah, very good. I love that, you know, you've taken this class to get educated about an actual situation in your life with your sister, but it's also like reflected in what you need for yourself. And so, you know, and how do we set small goals that aren't, so that we can really, you know, try to navigate through overwhelm that is going to paralyze us, right? Use those sort of tricks. Yeah, so Cynthia, and then Teresa will circle back to you.
One of the things that Christine and I talked about yesterday was neither one of us have children or much family who are competent, capable, and or willing to function in these roles for us. And so we sort of are seeking people, you know, outside of ourselves, whether it be friends or whoever who can function in these roles, power of attorney, healthcare advocate, blah, blah, blah. And we were talking yesterday about, you know, how to create some kind of community where, because younger people might be able to help us, and then, you know, it's a giving back process where we help people and then maybe they can help us in our transitioning, you know, and how to sort of get that started. And I'm here, I know a lot about the death doula movement, and it's great, and certainly have thought about that for myself when the time comes. So anyway, it's kind of, it can feel quite sad and lonely, like when we were talking about green burials and a 3-day vigil. You know, I would love that for myself, but I don't know anybody that's going to hang out with my body for 3 days. You know, and if it's in a hospital or a hospice, they're going to want you out. And I mean, it just so depends. Like you say, you get what you get. And that's really helpful for me to keep, you know, I'd like A, but it may just turn out to be D or E that I get. So, anyway, I just kind of wanted to put that out there because we talked a lot about that yesterday, how to create some kind of flow of giving and taking where people could work together to perform some of these functions.
Yeah, I love your thought. Yeah, I'm gonna let Teresa speak, but then I want to share with you about forming a death care team and some of my thoughts about that. I think you're already sort of thinking in those lines.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
So let me come back to that. Teresa, go ahead next.
Yes, what this brought up for me was this paperwork and getting these financial questions answered, and the disposition of the body is so important. And I tend to neglect those kind of things, but with my experience with death, with the loss of my daughter, it was so overwhelming, and I didn't know what to do with the body, but I wasn't going to leave her in Dallas, Texas by the highway. And so with not knowing, but keep asking the questions, the answers came, and it was so beautiful. So I had my husband just hide her in the house somewhere. I didn't want to know. I was young. And, but one day my family came and we all hiked Mount Scott at Crater Lake, which is a natural park. And we disposed of her ashes by Phantom Ship. And then we built a house, and where I slept in my bed was a view of Mount Scott. So it's just like, we don't know, but you keep asking questions, and when it feels right, I believe those answers do come. But it is so important to get, the details done as well, but it is a mystery, and surrendering to that part of it is often very efficient.
Yeah, I love what you're saying, and oh, what a beautiful story and a tragic loss, it sounds like. And I think that if we get more death literate, then we can be more able to step into that mystery, as opposed to the shock of not being comfortable or familiar with death. And then we have such a long way to go to get through that shock to step into those beautiful questions that you're talking about. So we're having conversations about death, and we're asking questions about death, and death happens. We're more able to be resilient in those moments to ask those questions. So thank you. That is a beautiful piece of wisdom. Let me share that I had a death care team, living in at my community, Earth Haven Eco Village, for over 20 years, and I've been transitioning from that place to more of my life in Asheville. And there was recently a death, and I think I might have shared like, oh, I'm not really central to this death right now in this community, so I need to refocus my death care team. And so there's about 7 of us, women, all women, who there's 3 women in their 70s, 1 woman in her 60s, 1 in her 50s, 1 in her 40s, and 1 in her 30s. And so we have committed to being a death care team for each other. We're going on retreat together. We're sharing, getting to know each other more deeply, having fun together. And then, yes, like exactly what you were saying, Cynthia, building a sense of community. The elders support the youngers support the elders. And then part of our goal with this is to be communicating how to do this to the world, because we need more of this, right? We need to come together in these ways, especially as women who are choosing not to be focused on our primary relationships or don't have primary relationships, who've chosen not to have children. And you spoke so beautifully and vulnerably to like, great, it's all great, well and good with the vigil, but who's going to come to my vigil? I've lived this independent life, right? So that's a real experience, right? And then what are the choices? What are the creative choices open to us in those contexts, right? And, being around death, being receptive, being supportive, and supportive of the death process is an incredible gift. So I think that with a little creativity and intention, I believe that you can pull together a death care team, and maybe we can compare notes as we sort of put this to the world and say, like, this is possible, this is doable, we all want this, this is the kind of community we all want. Yeah, so thank you for sharing.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. So take a breath with me. I am willing to stay on for as long as you all want to stay and talk and process and ask questions, because we were rushed today with Meredith coming. And for those of you who need to leave now that it's 6, blessings and thank you for being here. And what a beautiful experience and an opportunity to deepen in these little boxes. I feel you all. So thank you for being here.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you for all your work. My Lord, it's taken years to put together. In 8 hours. Wow. Gee.
And if you're overwhelmed, just keep breathing through and step by step. And, you have your buddy, use your buddy, and the resources. Yeah. So again, if you have to go, goodbye. And if you're staying, I'm open to whatever, bye, Jess, whatever questions you have or discussions you want to talk about still. Bye. Linda.
Hi.
Hi.
Well, this was so great. And there's so many pieces and people just said things but okay. The thing that I've gotten away from this is that I knew nothing about even green. I heard the word green burial. I knew nothing about it. So now that's a whole nother, which is a little daunting because I'm already way over extended in all that way, but it's got it in me to think. And so I'm meeting my friend who's my executor of my will next Friday for dinner. She's coming here and we're going to talk about it. And I said that before, but I have a friend in England and we are having a conversation. I'm having one with my kids. And I would have never started having a conversation, also not knowing what to talk about. Those 5 wishes, and you may have said this before we started the class, and I just missed it, but that would be a good thing to have read before the class, just because I would have come in just knowing more about it. I guess that would be my only other, I thought this is amazing. Yeah, you could do it all those other ways, once a month, you could do it for another time. But that's also more time into it. So I love the idea that we have a buddy, and it's also helped me create the buddies that I already have, right? And then I too thought, like Cynthia said, it's like, well, who's going to be there? I do have children, but I don't know. I like this idea of creating wherever you go a team. And I plan to move to Italy. So now I got to find out, what do they do? And I love that idea of in the woods that you could be buried. That's the way to go. And even though I always thought it would be organ donation, but when I heard all that about the back and forth, I went, oh, no. That's no. And if you can give back to the earth, and there was something about mushroom spores and all that, that just seems like, okay. And so you've given so many nuggets, and I thought just by having a power of attorney and the medical thing, and I have a trust just because I had young children when I made it too, and all of that, that doesn't even begin to touch. And I love the thing about literacy. And I guess what you just said was talking more about it. And so I'm glad I have 3 conversations about to have, but I've already thought of others. And I have a friend who's a death doula. I didn't even know that existed. I just met her and I was like, you got to take this course. If you're good, I know she knows some things, but I don't know if she knows all this. So that's another place that you might market, even though people have become death doulas through a death cafe or something. I don't know. I feel like this is like the top of the line, that because you covered all of it. And I'm not sure that everybody knows that. They might be able to be there personally. And I know my friend would be just a really good, she's just rich in connection, but I don't know if she knows all this other stuff, you
Right.
know.
Right. Yeah. Well, encourage her for sure. Yeah, I appreciate your enthusiasm, and I'm hearing you say like, wow, what a breadth of content, and also that it's a kickstart, right? This course is a kickstart to these conversations, right? And it's, I think that, you know, hearing some people say, I want the course to be a step-by-step hand-holding process so that I actually get to a goal of finishing this, and other people saying, no, I'm okay with this being a kickstart, right? But any way you look at it, it's stirring up these conversations, it's stirring up these questions, and it's a literacy and a contemplation. So thank you for that reflection. That's beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah. Others? Cynthia.
I've really good at the paperwork part. So if anybody needs help, you know, I'm happy to volunteer my whatever it is I know or don't know to, you know, I've done for myself. I've been in lots of situations where I've had to do, redo wills, my will, and which I have done.
You an attorney, Cynthia?
I did have an attorney here in Asheville, and I do not recommend this person. I mentioned 5 wishes to her, and she completely poo-pooed it. And I went to her because she was cheap. She was less expensive than anybody else, but I wouldn't recommend her. And I went specifically to her because I said, I don't have anybody to perform these functions. Oh, there's options. And I got to her office. She had no options, you know.
Well, the reason that lawyers poo-poo the 5 wishes is because they don't see it. It's not familiar in the legal framework that they're in.
Right.
There's validity to that. Like from their perspective, they want these other things. And I think the spiritual, heartful, emotional, relational component that the 5 wishes is an entry to it's a great starting point, and I think and hope that it's valid in its own framework, but I think that their input is also helpful.
Yeah, I mean, and I need a lawyer. Because of the way I've got stuff structured, I definitely need one. And so she did it. She did the paperwork. I've got it all right there, blah, 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 blah. And but, you know, we kind of got into a back and forth about, well, this is how I want certain parts written. And this is anyway. But so there's just, but anyway, I'm happy to help anybody that.
Well, maybe you could reply to the email string when I send out the final stuff and offer that. That's a really lovely offer, because some people have a lot of hurdles around that actual component, which is not easy for everyone. Not everyone has the kind of brain that can get through paperwork. So that's a beautiful offer.
Well, I'm happy to do it. What I need is your November workshop. You know, I've got to, you know, although I'm pretty comfortable. And also the other thing I'm pretty interested in is, I think Chris is gone, but just that whole the sovereignty you were talking about, and you know, assisting oneself when they feel the time is right to transition, to cross over on their own, which I'm really a big proponent of. And
yeah, there's an underground web, you know, you can find these things if you look hard enough online when they're not censored, you know, and there's ways that people are experimenting with. And yet, go ahead.
The organizations like Death with Dignity and Compassion and Choices, I've been pretty aligned with them for a long time. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
the society that can't help people die well can't help people live well. I mean, I know
exactly.
that's trite, but it rings so true for me. And
Me
there's
too. Me too. And
Yeah.
I've seen it in action where the suffering is just it's brutal for some people.
Yeah.
So I have a comfort care pack in my freezer. You know,
That's
sort of,
nice. Yeah.
Yeah,
Morphine's not a bad way to go. And yet
no,
the November
Yeah.
class, I mean, Linda and Marissa took the class with Mary and I, and the truth of the matter is, when you talked about, the whole thing, the alone thing, the truth is that we all die alone.
exactly.
This is a journey with our soul. And if we can get right with that process and have as good of a death as we possibly can, that's the ultimate thing to go for, in my opinion.
I agree completely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. The thing that I have to write down is I don't want certain people in my family coming with their face in my face, asking me certain religious questions, and so it's like, get the cops to remove them.
Well, having a patient advocate or, a
Right.
dying advocate that knows your wishes and can be a badass in the face of that, start building those relationships.
Exactly. So that's part of a death care team.
Exactly.
Be the guard at the door. No, we're not going to talk. You're not going to talk to Cynthia about that.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. You got to get some bulldog friends.
Exactly. So I'm going to be working on a death care team. So I'll be probably more in touch with folks about that.
Yeah, I love it. I
Yeah,
love it. Thank
well,
you. That's
yeah.
a good share. Phyllis, we never did get back to you earlier, and I'm sorry about that. It's
That's
time.
okay. I was just typing it in the chat. I just want, this is pretty easy. I just wondered, you're talking about not being able to find a bank account numbers for somebody who's died. Is there a system that you recommend for kind of collecting all that financial information, phone numbers, account numbers, and stuff like that?
Yeah, I just tell a funny story, which is one of our community members died and there was somebody as the beneficiary, but we couldn't figure out who. And it was like, we knew it was somebody in the community. And so we had to keep guessing. And then we had to talk to somebody else at the bank because we couldn't just keep guessing, So, I have just written all that stuff down, printed it out, and put it with my end of life paperwork. I don't have, LastPass is one of these, password protected online services where you only have one password and then it saves all your other passwords. I hate that thing, but some people love it. And, I feel like I keep my passwords in a really bad way. I keep them all in a spreadsheet in a Google document, and people tell me not to do that, but I do that. And so I have one master password to get into my Gmail account, and then they can get to all the rest. I think about just getting into my phone. If I could just put my phone password really big in the front of my paperwork and my Gmail password. If they had those two things, they could get to the rest of it, right?
Yeah.
So write it really big on the outside folder and hope it doesn't burn down.
Well, thank you. I need to go, and I wanted to express my undying gratitude.
It's great to be with you, Phyllis. Lovely to see you.
Thank you. Thank you for this course, for making it possible for us to be here and really benefit from your wisdom.
Yeah, well, it was lovely
Appreciate
to
it.
have you. You had so much good stuff to offer. Thank you in return.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Where did you get that, Lee, that envelope thing that you keep in the freezer? Because I've always kept my wills in the freezer. Where did you get that one?
It's an office supply store or
Oh, okay.
Amazon or something, like a plastic sheathing thing.
Right. Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah.
I've just had them in Ziploc bags, but I didn't know if that was a special thing or something.
I don't think so. Ziploc is probably fine too. Low tech.
Okay.
Marissa, you were awfully quiet today. We didn't hear from you.
Nope.
You have anything you want to add?
Not really. I've enjoyed doing this. I enjoy all the classes that you have taught. I'll take any class you give.
Yeah.
You speak my language.
No, no.
But no, this has been really good. It has brought up some interesting questions. I had been talking to my partner Linda about that. The fact that I don't want my body here when I die, and that most of the people I can think of for my team would not be local people here geographically, has made me really stop and think, like, so why am I here? And what do I need to do different? So that's been kind of interesting.
So
And
what
then,
you're saying is where you're living right now is not where your closest, most intimate people are, and you're wondering about that disconnect.
Right.
Yeah, fascinating.
Yeah.
That's a big question, isn't it?
It is a big question. So that's been kind of taking more of my time than I've spent working on all this other stuff. And then I did have a couple of different people die this week. So the whole death thing is very much in my face, it seems like lately. So that helps. And it is a huge relief just to talk about it with a group of people. Because when you're just thinking about it by yourself, somehow it becomes so depressing and you feel so alone. But just being with a group of great people, just talking about anything having to do with it, any of the details, it just makes it all feel so much more, I was going to say survivable. That's not the right word.
I think that is the right word. That is the right word.
Yeah, it just feels like a kind of a, like just another thing we do in life that doesn't have to be terrible. It has its fun side. It has its touching side. And so I think that alone makes this whole thing worthwhile, I think. But and then all this information is great. I just have a whole different sense of what I need to do, and it seems much less daunting. So that's good.
Yeah, there's some wisdom in you that is, that is just taking these classes and being present with this conversation, whatever that wisdom is. I think that it makes life more precious. For me, it just makes life more precious. Annie, do you want to check in? Bye, Linda.
Well, I was just going to say something. So let Annie go
okay.
first. Well, I was just saying that you really bring on all of the spiritual, by sharing your experiences of the deaths that you shared. And I mean, I've not had any of that. I mean, my mother died in her sleep. She didn't have any, we had a traditional funeral, and my brothers didn't even want to have what do they call, like when you come to the funeral home and
wake,
kind of thing. I said, are you kidding? I mean, like, we're at least doing that. And I pushed, and they were surprised at who showed up. They didn't live here anymore, but people came, and just hearing people's stories was so important. But the other part that you brought in with the spiritual, it's making me think a lot more about death I'd already started thinking of it in a different way, but I haven't had a spiritual community, and now I really want that more. And how can I develop it with the people that I already know, or to make that a priority of finding people? And it might not be a church, and that's not it, but it's how to find your way. You really brought that to the light for me. And the people that I already know being so excited to have this conversation. Which means I did pick some good people. You know what I mean? Like, I thought, oh, they're not, but no, they were all like, no, this sounds great. We should talk about it. So.
Yeah, people drift in and out of our lives all the time. I mean, that's the nature of life. And right, like, I've just made a decision to have a couple of friends drift out. Like, it's just not vibing for me. And so I think it's really great what you're saying, which is I have some room for some new energy, and I need them to be death literate. Death excited, death positive. That's a great intention to put out. I love that idea.
Yeah. I think people will welcome it, actually. Most people, at least most
Mm.
people that I know. So, but who knew? I never knew to bring it up. So thank you.
Totally.
I'm gonna go. Thank you, Lee. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
Been fantastic. Yeah, thanks so much.
Annie, do you have some thoughts?
I've enjoyed all of it and this last part, hearing from people, and yeah, it really does stir up what is here, what is present, values confirmed, and also what is missing. And as a teenager, I imagined living in an intentional community in the country, and I haven't gotten there. I did work in workers' co-ops, food co-ops, making tofu and other things for a good 10, 15 years, and then moved into other work. And currently I have community, but it's like one person at a time. I have really good, close relationships, but one person at a time. And the recent pandemic sort of just really highlighted that, And so I too am really interested in building some kind of positive community around life and around death and around joy and around, closeness.
Yeah. Well, maybe those one-on-one people can get together and maybe there'll be some resonance. I mean, hosting a Day of the Dead event, the Death by Chocolate thing is so fun. And yeah, maybe you'll find some resonance.
Yeah, thank you. I'm really inspired to do that. So
Yeah.
I appreciate sending other people your way as well.
Yeah, that'd be great. Awesome.
Well, I need to work in 10 minutes, so I'm gonna get going. Thank you so
Bye,
much.
y'all. Much love.
Bye.
Bye,
Thank you.
Linda. Bye, Linda. Bye.